Jones, and I'm here to tell you folks, the world has fallen. The fascist globalist overlords, they're implementing the Great Reset. You don't believe me? I've seen the tapes. Watch it, folks. Watch as these pot-bellied Zoomer goblins work with the Illuminati to pit us against each other. I promise I'd be a good boy.
Ugh, I'm a good boy.
There's only one cure, folks, and that's liberty. And there's no better channel to find freedom than Fabian Liberty. Anarchy is order. Government is civil war.
You're offensive. Police lives matter?
We're just trying to do school.
What?
You guys have the same sticker as the others.
But this is our space. You're making the space uncomfortable. But you're white.
You're fucking a white male!
What is one way you combat racism? I don't root for white people on the sidewalk.
They want your wallets, they want your guns, they want the wieners off your sons. Democrats.
Oh no, we should film
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Just one small problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman! Vaccine!
Children, they're spreading COVID throughout the population at higher numbers. And people are not entitled to turn themselves into deadly biological weapons by spraying disease-laden aerosols wherever they choose, randomly killing innocent people. This is not freedom, this is homicide, and willful ignorance is no excuse.
What the fuck?
Highest margin of victory yet. It's really impressive. Though, I'm starting to think he might have had help from the Russians.
Look at me, I'm a gay frog. I'm so cool, I'm so neat. I'll never have children and I'm sterilized. But the media says I'm totally cool. I'm a gay frog, I'm a gay fish. It's so good, and I think my daddy had disease.
So, it's a little earlier than I've been typically kind of starting around 8, you know, a little bit before 8, but I'm talking to Honey Badger Radio today, so we did it a little bit earlier, which means here very, very shortly, I'm going to hop on and try, what is it, like Voodoo TV or something? It looks like something similar to StreamYards. So it should be all right, I guess. It's another browser source thing. Hopefully it doesn't have any issues. Luckily, I'm streaming and not trying to record. Sometimes those like internet record things can mess with that, but we should be fine. But I'm glad you guys are coming in. I'm happy to talk about some libertarianism, some men's issues. And then later at around 8:30, be on a panel with, I'm not sure who all is going to be there. Not Eli Monty was supposed to be there, and then he like freaked the fuck out saying that the very concept of the debate was bad faith intrinsically, and like it would be evil for him to even be a part of the debate, that, and he's sorry that he considered it. Commies are so fucking annoying. I can show it to you guys. I don't care. I told him, I was like, I'll leak that shit. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. But But yeah, so we're gonna get into it fairly quickly, which means I'm gonna have to cut off my camera and then give my browser source, and then and hopefully everything works out. I think it'll be fine. But I'm super glad to have you guys here. I'm excited for tonight. If the debate goes like super quick and it's like over in like an hour or something, then we might fuck around, watch some reaction stuff. I kind of want to do at some point. I want to do a Disney princess tier list of films, okay? But not a tier list of how good they are in terms of like cinematography or story or like how entertaining they are, but like which ones are trash for your kids to watch because they teach bad philosophy and bad ideas, and which ones are based. So like I kind of want to do like a Disney princess tier list, because like if you're a parent, you're kind of fucked. Like you're just gonna have to watch Disney princess films if you have a daughter. Like there's no way around it. You don't want to be the weird person like in the hills that's like, my daughter only listens to good solid Christian music. You're gonna end up with a weird preacher's daughter scenario. She's gonna run off like, gallivanting because she had no freedom. But like at the same time, like there are certain films where it's like, okay, this is just a bad film. Like you shouldn't watch this. It just teaches bad shit. And some of them, geeks and gamers freaked out about for no fucking reason. And then some of them are based and they don't get talked about enough. Spoiler alert, Princess and the Frog. Princess and the Frog is like one of the most based fucking films you can watch, period. Like for your daughter. Like the whole point of Princess and the Frog is like, stop focusing on your career too much. Find a playboy, find a playboy prince and like make him a man and have a fucking family and give us some grandbabies. We need them. Right? And that love is something deeper than like superficial desire. Like that's the point. Fucking make me some grandbabies. Don't focus too much on your career. Like that's the most conservative fucking film ever. And that's a 90s. Like that's a 90s. I don't even think it's that. I actually think that might be like early 2000s. And that's like the token black Disney princess, and it's based as fuck, So I don't know. I kind of want to talk. I want to do that at some point. We might do it. It just kind of depends on like when we have time. We'll see how long the debate runs and stuff. If it's a long debate, I'm probably, after a conversation and a debate, I'm probably just gonna be like out of it. But let us come over here and grab this link. Oh, hold on. I messed up. I gotta cut this off. Switch this to Logic Capture, close. There we go. Now we can hit the link. There we go. There we go. Join with camera. Please ensure you have allowed the camera permissions in your browser. Yeah. What are you talking about? What? No. Join with camera. Allow. There we go. Sonar microphone. High resolution. There we go. This must be like one of those like free platform things or something. But we're gonna hop in here, boys, and then we will put it on the screen.
All right. Hey, what's up?
Hey, how you doing? Oh,
I'm good. How are you? Good. All right. I just need to set up a few things on my end, and then we can get started. Thanks for coming on and doing this. So, this platform, Video Ninja, was created by a guy during the COVID lockdowns. And I thought it was really neat because he was basically like, we're gonna have all these restrictions imposed on us, may as well build our own thing. So I thought that was pretty cool, and been using it when I can. So there it is kind of finicky in terms of that's why I said make sure that you have your permissions set up, because people get a bit weird about that, and they make mistakes, and it ends up being a problem. So just give me a moment here. Control audio via OBS. And you should be, there you go. Perfect.
All right. Can you hear me? Right. Everything's good?
Yes, everything is good. I just need to move some things around in my Open Broadcaster software, make sure it looks good for my audience to see.
Hold on, pause. Did you just say OBS with all of the words?
Did I say Open Broadcaster software? Sometimes I do that. Yeah. Yeah, it happens. Sorry.
I mean, it's okay. I was like, really? All right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard someone actually say that in a very long time.
Yeah. Okay. This looks good. Excellent. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm an older guy, so I got my way of doing things. So thanks for being so patient. I see that I'm looking at your stream too. So I was trying to make sure that there was no issues. So, I work with women, and they're just technologically illiterate. So it's always a struggle. But thanks for being cool with that. All right, so I am going live here on my end and making sure that everything is working before I get started. All right, that looks good.
All right, boys.
I saw that you also have a gaming channel. Oh, I can't hear you.
Well, I was talking to them. I muted myself.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, no, I haven't really done much with it.
Yeah.
Just because the amount of time that I have. So I don't have an editor anymore. Right. Mm-hmm. So that changes quite a bit. Hold on one second.
Is that something that you want to get into?
The Nazi debate. The Nazi debate will be after this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I had, it all just depends upon money, time. I would enjoy doing it. Well, I mostly have it because it's if I get back into it and I start doing more, then I'll start gaming some more. But it'll just be I look at it the same way, kind of like Sargon of Akkad has a gaming channel. I'm not really I don't want to be a gaming streamer or anything. But if I want to hop on and hang out with some people and throw some gaming on and have that conversation, have some convo and little AMAs or whatever and chill. I want to be able to do that without having that be negative content that the algorithm doesn't like, because it's not targeted towards my audience. It's only targeted towards a smaller group of people that want that type of thing. Because I tried to do that on Twitch for a while.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is it negatively affected my Twitch channel, because their algorithm is based off recommendations. So then I start streaming in other categories, and and it didn't really work. They need to be separate.
All right, no, fair enough. I mean, I have a little gaming channel on the side too. That's why I was asking. All right, so I'm about to start here, and I know you've already started on your end. So
yeah,
let's do this thing.
I didn't want to figure out.
Thanks for coming.
Time.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, and we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and I am. This is the Fireside Chat, and I'm joined today by a very special guest. Well, I only know your online sort of persona, which is Fabian Liberty. So that's how I, put your name on the screen there. And you can check out all of his links. I put them in the description of this video. Fabian, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I had some people reach out, and I wasn't super familiar with kind of the Honey Badger, group, if you will. But people were like, hey, no. If you want to talk about libertarianism and talk about men's issues, these are some of the people you should absolutely have a chat with. And I was like, okay, well, I'll reach out on DM, and, I feel like it'd be a fun conversation. So I'm all here for it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good.
Real quick,
I don't know.
just so
Yeah,
that your
sure.
audience knows, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I am the end boss of libertarianism, if you will. I'm as libertarian gets, and that's mostly what my content revolves around: debating and discussing libertarian philosophy or debating, lefties in the online space. That's mostly what I do.
Right. And that's fine. Like I have ANCAP leanings myself. Frankly, I think that men's issues, like, maybe we should like define our terms before we start talking about this, because I think that we get, like, in a kind of collective blanket way, we get lumped in with all kinds of, other, I don't know, people that maybe they have like louder voices, but they don't really share the same principles. And so I guess, like, what was the comment, just to refresh everybody and for people who don't know, what was the comment that sort of spurred this conversation? Do you remember? You made a comment on Twitter.
I'm way
and then
too ADHD to remember that.
Okay. You made a comment on Twitter about men's rights activists being just like feminists. And
some of them are, for sure.
Yeah, and somebody that is a fan of ours, I think, or like they're a support of ours, said you should. Yeah, Sick Fox, that's right. And Sick Fox he replied to you. I think it was him. If not, forgive me if you are the person, but you're not that person. Just clear it up in the comments, and I apologize. But basically said, hey, you should talk to these people because we're not, like, I don't know, it just doesn't fit in with our modus operandi, as it were.
Yeah. So let me say, so to clear the ground, right? As you were saying, like, what do I think men's issues are, right? I think there is, deleterious effects towards things that the consequences of how society changes, tend to affect, one gender one way and another gender the other way because they're different, right? So I would be very, very vague about what I mean by men's issues. I obviously we can get specific in discussions about, like, child support or, marriage and family, or about, men being able to be open about certain issues, or, whatever those things may be. But ultimately, I think that's what those are, men's issues, right? And the way that I see the manosphere, the people talking about it, is kind of all over the place, right? I think you have some men's rights activists that are very whiny, unmanly, if you will, and you can get mad at me if you want about that, right? Like, very much bringing the bitch energy in, complaining about being an incel and things of that nature. It's doomer pilled, etc. And then you have, like, red pill people, some of which I think are trying to do well-meaning, but are often completely ignorant of, like, how science is conducted or what the studies they're referencing even mean. Then you have grifters like Andrew Tate and people like that are just saying the wildest things. Like, Andrew Tate recently said, just went on a whole rant about how you need 30 children and the white race is doomed because, we're not cheating on women and we're not, like, fucking everyone. We don't have multiple mistresses, that we have sex with no condoms, and this is why blacks are superior. Just completely.
He says, right? He's just, well, I think that not to cape for Andrew Tate, because I can get into, like, why I think his voice, or voices like his, are more predominant than, like, say, ours. I think that there's an advantage that the
negative
sort of, like,
engagement.
Establishment. Yeah, it's, like, on purpose, I think. But what I would say is, I think that I think what he's trying to do is be provocative so that people talk about him.
He's finding negative engagement. It works.
And it works. It does, because he's saying the thing that, feminists and the media and politicians and academics and intellectuals, it's the stuff that they love to, like, make what the manosphere is about, or make what, this part of the internet is
all
about.
At the same time saying what they're saying, the quiet part out loud too, right? Because they try and be subtle about it.
Well, who's they? What do you mean by that?
Okay, I don't mean the Jews. Just real quick.
No. I mean, like,
no, I'm messing with you.
When you say who's saying the quiet part out loud, that's what I don't. I honestly don't follow.
Andrew Tate is saying the quiet part out loud that I think a lot of frustrated manosphere people or other people are saying that are, into the more polygamy aspect, like that the small group that he's highlighting, you know, like I think a lot of them are probably not. It's not so much that he's saying the quiet part out loud in the sense that they're not saying it, but that it's like it's out there now, right? That there is a very, very small contingent that has a opinion like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. There are definitely frustrated men out there, and I don't think that them being frustrated makes them part of the manosphere. I think that you can be a frustrated male feminist, and end up like murdering your roommate because she wanted to be in a polycule. And I am of the opinion that men should have like the equipment to be able to sort of like understand and navigate the world as it is, while we try to essentially like make the let's say the system more fair. And just to be clear on where I stand on that, I think that the comparison to feminists is only fair insofar as perhaps there are some men that are in those spaces that do a lot of complaining and whinging, and I get it, that's true. But I can't control that. But our goals, at least here at HBR, and the people who work here, we don't all like have the same necessarily the same political beliefs. I think some people still like desperately grab on to like some degree of leftism, and I reject it completely. But we all are on the same page in terms of what we want. And ultimately what that is the difference between men's rights activists and feminists is the real important difference is that feminists are statists, and every solution, there is no such thing as a libertarian feminist. There have been women like Hannah Cox, you can like look at her content online. She claims to be a part of Reason, I think it's Reason magazine or something like that.
Aren't fucking libertarians.
No, they're not. But I'm saying but she brands
agreeing with
herself
you.
that way, right? Yeah. And she is obviously, by nature of her being a feminist, she must be a statist. And what we want is not to use the state to benefit men, because it can't benefit men. We want the state to get out of men's way, to basically get out of men's lives. But the problem, where the struggle is at, is that women generally are gravitating toward, they tend to gravitate towards the state, with only some exceptions. This is like an old problem, right? Women value security over liberty, and men value liberty over security. You probably have seen this yourself if you are indeed the final boss of libertarianism. You have seen that it's not popular with women in general, right?
Yeah, I mean, so there are incentives that are going to be stronger towards females than males, right? I mean, so one of the big problems that I think we have, and this is especially true in the manosphere, because this is really my goal in talking about men's issues at all, is I have three basic goals, three things that I think we need, right? Number one, we need libertarianism as a political philosophy, because we need the non-aggression principle, because we're actually going to solve these problems. We can't use the state. It's only going to be band-aids that are going to cause more problems. Number two, I think we need to return to conservative values, not necessarily conservative religious values, but values that are not dysgenic. We as a society can't be openly super pro OnlyFans and super openly pro prostitution and degeneracy and hedonism everywhere if we expect to have some normalcy return in relationships in as a whole in society. And number three, and this is what I think makes the manosphere and men's issues particularly interesting, is that I think that the manosphere and what we're seeing in these issues is actually a symptom of what occurs when trust in institutions is completely eroded, and when the science is supposed to inform us and the science has abandoned us. I think the men's issues and gender, like I think that this woke kind of leftist feminist nonsense is actually not as strong. People think it's strongest in sociology or in legal or in education. It's actually strongest in sex research, gender-based research. That is the strongest place that this is. And so what we are left with is a dearth of scientific research and understanding. And so what you have, I think, is a bunch of manosphere people trying to understand science that they're not necessarily trained in, or that they haven't like spent their whole life in, and trying to make sense out of what little there is to understand gender and sex and relationship differences, especially as society goes the way of South Korea, where women keep getting more and more feminist and men are starting to become more and more traditional. And there's a lot of bad roadblocks ahead, especially with this lack of science and lack of the non-aggression principle being stated so deeply. And then, of course, those conservative values. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like that's all stuff that we have said ourselves. The problem is that the incentives for women are so overwhelming. Like, this is the thing, but we see it, okay? Until women actually step up to the plate and take a long, hard look at themselves and decide that they're going to essentially resist the temptations for immediate earthly joy, whatever you want to call it, right? These incentives, then things are only going to get worse. So yes, you're right that a lot of this feminist stuff begins in a kind of sexual or like sex education, but it bleeds out into every single aspect of our society. It is in everything, and so and women love it.
Theory?
I mean, I've talked to some people about it before, but what do you want to say about this?
Well, no, it's just, the kind of push pull, right? The push pull of institutions versus the individuals in society, right? Right. It's like the chicken and egg kind of comes to mind when you discuss systems theory, because you're positing that women as a whole need to kind of give up the carrot, right? And just stop chasing the carrot that the institutions are forcing upon them. And in a way that will change the institutions. And yet the reverse is often true too, right? Which is if you got rid of the carrot, so it was just an interesting.
That could be that could also be true, but there is a problem with that. This is why I'm not saying that women have to be the only ones. I'm saying they have to be a part of the solution, right?
Oh, for sure.
So, and right now, like literally there is like women have replaced men in their life with the state. And they have been convinced, you can say through propaganda or education. I think it's a number of factors. Plus, we are also kind of 3 generations in, like after the Great Society and all of these other socialist policies that have essentially paid women to exclude fathers from the home. So we're in the middle of the story now. Like you can't put the genie back in the bottle without essentially asking people, men and women, but I think in particular women, because I think men are generally ready to do whatever it takes to to accomplish their goals. I think most people come into the world and this is just a simple thing that doesn't have to be political at all. And it shouldn't be. They want to meet someone of the opposite sex. They want to marry them and they want to have kids with them. And that's like the best outcome you can have for a society. But women are not incentivized to do that, and men are starting to respond. Some of them retreat into online, communities like the red pill or the manosphere because they want to understand what's happening. Some of them go and become incels, and they kind of go down this doomer spiral.
Right. Some just become Sigma badasses. Or I go to the gym, I work out, and I don't give a fuck about bitches.
That's true, but in the long run, this is the problem that we're facing. I don't want to go too much of a tangent here, but there is a problem with this, is that if people in the West don't start forming families, our replacement rates are low and the borders are open, and people who will make babies will come in this country and they will essentially populate the people who are here, and that libertarian dream is not going to happen. We will be living under a caliphate, like what's happening in the UK right now, right? So this is the thing, the problem of men and women coming together and forming families is the baseline for every other problem. It comes first. It's where life begins, right?
There's another danger here, right? And I know this is a dangerous topic because this book is very dangerous because of a specific chapter about race and IQ. But setting aside the
I don't have a
race
problem
and
with
IQ,
that at all.
right? But nevertheless, I don't know you, and I'm just saying that that's not really what I'm trying to talk about, anyways, right?
Sure.
Is the bell curve the main point of the bell curve, the actual thesis of the book? If you could, nail it down to one thesis, is about IQ drain in demographics, right? Is a concept.
Yeah, the brain drain, right?
Right, the brain. Well, not just from other countries, but because we used to live in, you know, small towns where people very rarely left a small town. You know, highly intelligent, well-to-do men would marry, you know, potentially maybe the smart girl in town, but there wasn't this like this. Actually, this is. I want to back up just for a second before I get into
Sure.
this. One of the biggest problems that I have, and that is really difficult with talking about these issues, especially when talking about sociology, is that human beings don't have heuristics for two things. And this is really, really important as our society becomes technological, more interconnected, as more data gets thrown into things. And so what those two things are we don't have accurate heuristics for deviation, standard deviation, and standard distribution, right? We don't really understand like logarithmic scale. Like we don't really understand, for example, when someone uses the term mid, right? That they're kind of referring to someone between, you know, a 3 and a 7. Right. But what we think, when we think average, we think 10, 20, 30, 40% of the population, when a standard distribution is really 66.7%, right? We don't really think that way because we're supposed to live in communities of like 200, right? And we don't really understand exponentials. We don't really get that. And so I think it becomes difficult for us to deal with things like online dating, for example, where thousands of people are put into your kind of your local situation. And all of a sudden the effects of distributions become so much more drastic. And this is something that is true too of what you're speaking about, of not having children and pair bonding and IQ, is that we're very, because of this inability to understand the problem with a simple heuristic, and because of the immigration, and because of the kind of the lack of breeding, because we're no longer as much of a high trust society. Men cannot trust a woman to marry them and not fuck them and not end up in divorce court. We're losing trust in our society, and that means our birth rate is declining because of that trust. What you have is a really scary situation where the low IQ immigrants, and I'm not saying all immigrants are low IQ, legal immigrants actually tend to be slightly smarter because of brain drain. But when you're talking about 7.2 million people coming across the border in one presidency, and most of these people being the poor, the destitute, the unsuccessful, you're talking about
or
a low
the
IQ
criminal,
population. Or the criminal. And so what you're dealing with is a situation where you're going to have a very, very, very small breeding amount in the high IQ, incredibly high IQ people that are moving away from a mass of low IQ breeding, and the very class issues that our society kind of tried to help solve by the creation of a middle class and capitalism and markets and liberal democracy is going to disappear, because you're going to have demographics of high IQ, low population, and demographics of low IQ, high population. And it's going to cause more problems than most of us, I think, are willing to admit, because
absolutely,
racism
absolutely.
Discussion.
Yeah, well, that's a distraction, right? We can't have an honest conversation about like what will be the incentives, how does, and I mean, I don't know that it's like a bit of a distraction to get on the topic of demographic change and the border, but yeah, I mean, like I think that like it's definitely a factor. There's actually a good question to ask, because women overwhelmingly voted for this. And I think that Scott Adams, he made a tweet about this a while back where he said that women were voted for more men to come in because they wanted to open up like their odds of breeding with an appropriate man by just letting all the men in. I know. I don't know if I believe that. But like we are talking in some way, we are talking a bit about hypergamy, which is totally real. So when for most of human history, marriages were arranged, and it wasn't because of some like, you know, patriarchal control from the top down or anything. It was mostly about, you know, like you just married people that were in your vicinity. So if you lived in a village, the girl in the village would, you know, date you, or well, like she would meet your parents, or your parents already knew each other, and you were just kind of set up, and nobody really thought of it like as a restriction outside of anything except for vicinity, you know. And then as technology advanced and we industrialized and we started going into cities, then it changed that a little bit more. And I'm not even talking about like, you know, the aristocracy, which mostly married for like political reasons. And now that we live in the modern world, no, that's another, I'm saying that's a different thing. But now that we live in the modern world, dating has become like globalized, right? Essentially, or almost globalized, because we all have the world at our fingertips and we can meet people from anywhere. But what ends up happening is that you do end up with things going like women are constantly thinking about like, you know, is this the right choice? Am I, you know, getting the best deal, the best bang for the buck, for my buck or whatever. And they end up, you know, swiping, like, what is it when you reject somebody? I don't do online dating. I'm married. Is it swipe right on everybody that you don't like? And so, you know, you get like these extremely skewed statistics, and women's preferences are basically through the roof because they have this idea, like this sort of overinflated sense of self. And most men
I want to talk about, I want to talk about that and a couple other things, because I think this is a prime example. This is a bit of a myth. And this is a prime example of what has happened because science and researchers have abandoned this issue completely in favor of junk, pseudo-scientific bullshit that the feminists put forward. There is this myth based off of like Tinder and OkCupid studies, etc., right? That kind of exaggerates the female experience of like whom they choose and whom they don't choose, right? So there are a couple of confounding variables when we look at it. Number one is that some women are swiping left a bunch out of a habit, and because they have no desire to, because they're looking for backups, or because they're, even though they're in a relationship, so they're cheating, or because they are, because they need some type of validation. They want to see what's out there, so they're questioning, or simply because they're testing the waters, even though they don't have a desire to actually date. And these are things that, while yes, men do these things, they do them to the much less degree. So this kind of skews the data, right? Like the data is very really controlling for these things. And then another thing about this data is, is that it always focuses on who's doing online dating, right? So that already is selecting a specific type of female versus other types. And there's a bunch of other confounding variables. Another one being that men get desperate, and so they swipe often people that they won't actually date. Then they'll be rude or disgusting towards those people because they're frustrated. And then women kind of cloister themselves and become even more protective of themselves. So they become even more like you have to be perfect, right? And it's less about women preferences in the dating market and more about the kind of the fucked upness around the way our brains don't really work well with online dating.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not really like doing the PUA thing. I'm just using this as an example of how the landscape has changed and what incentives women respond to in terms of like partners and also family and all this. Like women are waiting longer to have children. Women are like, there was do you know Tom Woods, I assume?
Yeah, I'm aware.
Tom Woods podcast. Like, okay, so he had a man on that has a website called natalism.org, and they did a whole show together, and we covered it on our channel that talked about the declining birth rates and that
I was thinking antinatalism in my head, and I was like, fuck those people.
No, it was called natalism.
The reverse,
because it was pro-natalist. Yeah, it was pro-natalist. But in there, this is the thing that was the shocking bit of data, because obviously I'm not in the business of matchmaking, like in terms of that, whatever. You guys do whatever you think is best. I think there's probably like better ways to find a partner than I definitely know it's better than online dating. I think you should just look in your community. But what I think is worth bringing up, this is going back to the birth rates issue, is that the data that this guest on Tom Woods' show brought up, and I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but the website's called natalism.org.
I think it's like Native Americans and immigrants are like the only people that are even replacing themselves.
Yeah, somewhat, right? And I think like in West Africa, if you look at the global
in the US,
map, in the US, right? So what is discovered is this though. Of the women that ended up not having children, only 10% did not end up having children for either medical reasons, like they're infertile, there was some problem, or they had some kind of like actual desire not to have kids. Like they actually stuck to their guns and said, I don't want kids. There are some women like that, just like there are some men like that. And I wouldn't be the one to say that you have to have kids. But 80% or 85%, maybe even higher than that, of women that did not end up having kids, it was not because they didn't want kids. It was because they waited too long, and then the window of fertility passed. It just didn't happen. They didn't find a man that was like, maybe there were some good men that they passed on because they were hoping for something better, and it just did not happen for them. And it's actually very tragic when you look at how massive that is, because I think that there is like a very big push in our culture, in our social culture, to ask women to not see family as important, to not want kids, etc. And they're trying to do this with men as well. But the truth is, most people across the board do want families and children. So what the effect is, and there's a lot of factors we can get into as to why that's happening. I think that there is a push to reduce the population, and I think it's coming top down. And I think there's plenty of evidence to show that. Like there's these climate alarmists and these it's just kind of like a general anti-natalist push, and it's all and I think it is having some effects, and we're seeing this now. So that's kind of like, but again, here's the thing I just want to say, as a men's issues advocate, I don't like to say rights, because I think I don't like the word rights gets thrown around. I don't think it applies in most cases. Yeah, people call us men's rights activists, but yeah, but the reason why we call ourselves men's rights activists is because it was used against us as a pejorative by feminists, and we just kind of said, okay, then whatever. But like there are some things, like I'm against circumcision, for example. I think that's a violation of bodily autonomy, and that is a right. But mostly I just say issues, because a lot of this stuff does come from the state. It's things like the family courts and all of these, child custody laws and the welfare state and other things that I do think affect men in a lot of different ways. So that's,
you have a bunch
that's,
here.
Yeah.
You have a bunch to talk about here. So, maybe setting aside the arranged marriage thing, I have a slight disagreement with you, but I'm curious, just so like a little bit back and forth.
I'm not promoting arranged marriages. I'm saying that for most of history, that's what it was. Yeah.
Well, you said this thing that there was like kind of like a feminist myth about this was done for patriarchal reasons. And I think I actually kind of disagree with you a little bit, in the sense that I kind of agree with the feminists to a certain degree here, that it was done for patriarchal reasons a little bit, as the man and male of the head of the household. Because when you're giving over your 14, 15, 16-year-old daughter to a 24, 25-year-old man, you really are, in a sense, transferring ownership of your daughter. Now, there wouldn't have been an ownership in slavery in the way that we would have, but it would be an understanding that your daughter is not a fully autonomous individual that goes out forthrightly on their own to get their own property, to build their own farm, right? Like there is an expectation that she does need protection, and that she does need a man, and that she does need someone that is willing to do the things for her in order for them to create a family. And there is a certain passing off of one. And I think that's kind of part of what people are missing in is kind of fucking up our understanding of sexual autonomy around age. Because we're starting to see feminists now that are like, oh, you like women under 25? Did you know their prefrontal cortex isn't developed until, somewhere between the ages of 24 and 26? You like that 22-year-old girl? You're a fucking pervert. And I think there's actually kind of some truth to that as well, which is that, no, you're not a fucking pervert because you like a 22-year-old girl, but there is an understanding that, yeah, there is a certain level of autonomy that one gains over time and with the development of their brain, and that we did used to have a system, might not be the best system, but a system that counteracted this, which was, you don't get to marry my daughter unless you prove yourself to the family that you're going to protect her, that you do love her, that you're going to work hard for her, and that you have the means of doing all of those things because I'm gifting my daughter to you. This is my most precious thing. Please protect her.
Sure. Well, so what's the expectation on women in that scenario?
Childbirth, usually childbirth. And
what's the
homely
expectation
duties.
on? Sure. What's the expectation on men in that scenario?
Protection, finances.
Would you say that those? Yeah. Would you say that those things, without getting into like how much truth or whatever, but would you say those things are relatively like, I don't know, balanced? Like, does it make? I think it makes sense because men can't have babies, and women are vulnerable while carrying children. I'm not saying that this is like I
would say they're relatively balanced. I don't think it skews in favor of women as much as people think it does.
I'm not. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But I think that it is what it is. That's kind of like, I'm not trying to say that this is better than this. I'm just saying this is just what it is. Like,
I was just trying to answer your question. I apologize.
Be real. No, it's okay. I just wanted to. I'm just making sure that we know that my position on it is it is the nature of us as humans. It's just the way it's going to work out. And I think that the way that we've arranged marriage and family for most of our history, probably for the most part, is a decent model. And I think that this thing that we're going through now, post-sexual revolution, I think that that's all very recent stuff. I mean, what boys and girls probably got married pretty early on so they can start families and all that, and it's fine. Again, as my job here, doing this channel, is not about telling people how they should live their life or arrange their families, but rather we are it's to acknowledge that we do have a problem. We have a problem with the courts. I don't know if you saw that baseball player. I'm forgetting his name. He was a famous pitcher, and a woman did a false allegation, claimed that he beat her so that she can get a payday. And it was recently found out he had this whole fight. He lost his job. He had to playing for a Mexican team now because he had to leave the country because everyone thinks he's a piece of garbage. Right. And
that's just funny. It's just funny that that he's playing. It was accused wife beater plays for Mexico and they love him, saying he is machismo to the max.
No. Even over there are journalists saying hey, what about those things about you beating up that? But silly. He's essentially proved his innocence. He had all the receipts, kept everything. And the guy is super rich. Right. But the thing is that what we talk about is, okay, this guy lucked out, but a lot of men go through stuff like this. They lose their kids. If you look at, and it's always involves the state. There's literal incentives from the government for women to distance their children from their fathers. And this is one of the, I'm from Chicago. Now I live in Virginia now, but I was born and raised in Chicago. What?
I'm in Virginia too.
Oh, you are? Oh, I'm in Roanoke. What part you on?
I'm in Colonial Heights, Petersburg area.
Oh, okay. So that's cool. It makes sense. A lot of libertarians out here. But I was born and raised in Chicago, and I saw how bad the crime is, and I couldn't help but notice that the number one statistic, and they want us all talking about race, they want us all talking about these other things because they're basically trying to push for socialist policies. Not as a fix, but just to get something out of it. But the real issue is we're looking at destroyed families because fathers have been pushed out of the home because mothers, single moms, were incentivized to essentially exclude men from the home. And this is impacting the Black population by leagues ahead of everybody else, but all the other groups are catching up. And I'm well, this is the most basic men's issue is father's rights. Now, are there deadbeats? Of course. I'm not saying that there aren't, but the thing is that there are no things in place to essentially cause women to make educated decisions about who they choose to reproduce with. We have all these things in place. We have protection. We got abortion. We got all this stuff, and yet we still have this problem. And I think it's just it's go ahead
with that, right? Because we're talking about crime now, and crime is its associated to fatherhood and the incentive structures there. So
it is not
that, right. No, I didn't say it wasn't. I was just descriptively laying what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I would say that that is without a doubt a very big part of the equation, right? Obviously, we never want to do a univariate analysis, but I do understand what you mean, that is a huge part of it. Some of that goes away when you control for like poverty, right? Because obviously, single mother is going to be poorer than a family, under most circumstances, etc. But yes, for the like, and we have, unlike with most correlational kind of research, we do have the mechanisms for what we're talking about here, right? Which is like rough and tumble play, super important, especially in the couple years early development. And also the problem is worse than the data purports. And the reason the problem is worse than the data purports is because the data doesn't, very often we don't discuss school-age children and the fatherlessness rates of children at a certain age. Because what ends up happening is when you look at the fatherlessness rate as a whole, you're looking at men that are still in the lives of, let's say, a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. And it's like, that is important for development. As I said, rough and tumble play is important, right? But when we're talking about, let's say, what's the fatherlessness rate of children in the inner city in a black community that's lower socioeconomic status for middle school and above, all of a sudden that percentage is actually 10-15% higher than the general overall percentage. I mean, so there are a lot of issues there for sure. And the incentive structure on those is really problematic. I would also say that there are, Chicago's kind of a special case with like extra problems, right?
Sure. Corrupt government and all that. But I'm just saying,
well,
the
biggest one is that crime isn't necessarily correlated to poverty so much as it's correlated to relative poverty, right? So when you're poor and you see someone next to you that has a lot of money, that tends to like influence crime. Whereas like, poverty in the country where everybody's poor together, they kind of have an honor system. There's a lot less crime. And so Chicago's special because they took all of the projects and to fix the problem, they spread them out throughout the entire city, and it caused a massive spike in the crime, and they still haven't recovered from it because they did the worst thing you could possibly do, which is spread poor people next to middle class and wealthy people because it just infuriates them. But yeah, no, I definitely see your point there.
I think like you made a point
more
about
evidence of what I'm saying about the science. We lack science to really understand these problems because there's no researchers that are really doing there's like a couple of men's rights people, right, that are writing books, but there should be like just as much as there's government money going to like trans the fucking Palestinian kids or fucking government money to, to study the effects of a frog population in geothermal, power plants to make sure that the temperature doesn't rise too much. Yet there's like no studies beyond feminist crap on families, on the effects of men, on, all of these things. There's no good research out there.
Well, that's probably not an accident. I
don't disagree at all. No.
Yeah, I mean, like let's be real. We're talking about universities and intellectuals. There is no interest to address the problem. Like for most of the time, when I get into an argument with feminists or just like normie types, which I think most people on earth have some feminist leanings. They believe some of the myths of this history. And so it informs their opinions on other things. They will generally not care about that data. And I agree with you. There should be more of it. And yes, there are MRAs and MRA adjacent folks writing about this stuff, but that just supports what I'm saying when I say that, when you go on Twitter and the loudest voices that have any, like, I don't know, that are even in the same ballpark as like what we talk about are guys like Andrew Tate and Fresh and Fit. And I can promise you that that's not an accident either. Like if you promote the craziest people that have the wildest opinions that are saying the most like, easily, let's say the most wild stuff that people can characterize as representative of everything that we've been doing for 10 years, which has been looking at the data, looking at the studies, looking at where this comes from. Then it's no surprise that some people are going to have negative opinions on all of us because they see what he's saying. But he gets paid because the algorithm favors that kind of content, and it doesn't favor ours.
Engagement, right? It always favors negative engagement because negative engagement keeps people glued in because most algorithms are designed for advertisers, and it's very dumb. And I think we're probably going to see this go away soon. And the reason I say I think we're going to see this go away soon is because I've been tracking corporate research, and corporate research is now pretty well aware that the value of engagement is actually not that great because of the way that negative engagement next to an advertising campaign can actually cause people to have negative opinions about your brand as opposed to positive opinions. Because most corporate, online branding is about touches, right? It's like, I need my product to be seen 6 or 7 times, then people will think about my product. But if people associate your product with a negative video that they watched, even subconsciously, it can be really, really bad, especially for brands like that are really innocuous, like toothpaste and things like that, right? Where people don't have any political feelings about Colgate. But setting all that aside, what I wanted to say is, like, this is really what I want to hone in on is the science being so bad has caused this problem that I'm seeing, where when I look kind of, because I'm not a manosphere person per se. I mean, I have some opinions. I do online streaming, but that's not like my brand. My brand is libertarianism, and I have a mostly male audience, which, translates.
Frankly,
often.
I will say that I don't think those two things are that far apart. No, I mean, like, if you're seriously trying to address like the problems between men and women,
of society,
you're gonna head this way. The only problem is, I will say, and I'll let you finish, is that I think that a lot of the world is not ready for a libertarian perspective. I think that too many people are statist, and it's gonna take a lot. But I'm generally in support of this.
That's why my name's Fabian Liberty, because the Fabian Socialists that pushed the concept of socialism one policy at a time. I realize it's like, I think incrementalism is probably going to be needed. I don't want it, I'd love for it to happen instantly. But anyways, about the science, and this is kind of the thing, is that, like, what I see happen is I see people really actually trying to understand the issues with big audiences and big voices, trying to understand things, but because they lack, and I don't want to be insulting to all of the big manosphere people here, but hopefully, they don't take it too personally, but they lack a foundation of understanding how research is done, what statistics actually mean, or how to implement them and understand the difference between correlation and causation, which is like, elementary school shit, but like also like understanding mechanisms and understanding overlap, right? And so, like, I wanted to bring a couple examples because these are like really popular things. I think we can all like go, yep, and then we can all go, yeah, those are normal. People talk about it all the time. And then, so body count being one, right? Body count is something I see red pill people talk about often, all the time, and they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. They talk about body count and they talk about the science, like they've read the science, right? And they'll talk about pair bonding. And this is a prime example of correlation and causation, because a woman's body count is a really good heuristic, right? Like, if a woman tells you she's had sex with 100 people, it's a really good red flag that, like, you're probably not going to have a successful relationship with that person. And if she says she's had sex with under 10 people and she's honest, right? That's a fairly decent heuristic. But people don't understand the mechanism that's occurring here. And so, like, you can find this research on, there's a Christian organization, Families Foundation, I can't remember. You can look at their research where they tracked how many sexual partners. And what they found was, like, obviously the number one best successful relationship was virgin, right? But then surprisingly, 1 and 2 previous sexual partners tended to be worse, more likely to divorce than 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's because they had something to compare it to, but they hadn't really tested themselves out there, right? So now they're kind of questioning the validity of the relationship that they're in, et cetera. And so I have yet to see the study, so this is just a hypothesis. But there's no link between this concept of pair bonding with how many sexual partners you have. Instead, there's a correlation there. And so when I look at the research, I go, oh, well, what it appears to me, and it seems kind of obvious, honestly, is that what you're seeing is there's 2 types of girls, broadly speaking. A girl that will have one-night stands and fuck random people. And then there's the type of girl who won't fuck random people, won't have one-night stands, but will have sex with someone that they're in a serious committed relationship with. And so often we'll look at body count as like a number that like destroys the woman's psyche. And then we'll have red pillars talking about you need a virgin or you need as close to a virgin as possible. And then like you have women that have had sex with 6 or 7 dudes who were all their boyfriends for longer than 2 or 3 months. And it's like that woman doesn't have an issue pair bonding, right? Like that body count doesn't fucking matter there. Like what matters is like whether or not she treats sex as like something with someone that she loves in a committed relationship. And that's just like one example.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't have a problem with that. I think that in general, like, you know, it's not as simple as like, what's your body count? But if it's really high, I think that is a red flag. I think that a man can still try to save her, try to fix her if he wants. I don't think it's a good idea personally. Yeah. But again, I'm not in the business of necessarily giving relationship advice. I've found my unicorn. I'm done. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
I'm not saying I'm giving all the relationship advice.
I know.
Don't be Captain Savo. All right, don't be Captain Savo.
Yeah, don't be Cap. Yes, don't be a simp. But and that's something that I do think. I think that like ultimately, again, I'm not going to answer for like what these manosphere guys that are the loudest voices say. I think that, you know, and again, it is just another obstacle for us to overcome. I roll with people like Warren Farrell and Paul Elam and people who have written books on the subject.
I've read some of Warren Farrell's stuff.
Yeah, and these guys are like
he did really good work on Rough and Tumble Play, as I was mentioning earlier.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he's cool. I mean, I don't agree with him politically, but I think that he's made, you know, he's done work that, you know, I can only have tremendous respect for. But again, this comes back to what the issue is for us is, you know, we're having trouble reaching people because our content, which is, it's not necessarily positive. I mean, it's just like kind of like pointing out like this is how severe things are, and we will rebut like various, you know, sort of like articles or studies. We'll look at them, and a lot of it is crap because it comes out of academia, and academia is in bed with the state as well. And so these are things that just won't, this is the problem, right? We won't get good studies because good studies cost money. And it's very hard to build that foundation. It's just kind of like, you know, wanting to lobby for men's issues on the political stage. It's a pipe dream. Like nobody cares about men enough to like actually affect policy until, you know, you get into a crisis situation, which we may be approaching.
I think genetically speaking, that's a good thing, right? I do think, in a weird way, I do think it is absolutely good that men care more about women than they care about men's issues. I think that should be the case because women are like low, you know, doom comes to any society that doesn't venerate the female, especially the pregnant female. Simping is an important part of human society. The problem is kind of a similar situation with like immigration, right? You can either have immigration or you can have welfare, but you can't have both. You can either have a patriarchal society that protects women and simps for them and believes them even when they're kind of bullshitting, but you can't give them fucking the ability to vote, and you can't give them the power. You can't give them political power and have that. You can either have one or the other. You can't have both. If you're going to have an egalitarian society where women are given every opportunity, everything that a man has in those regards, then at the same time, you can't be patriarchal. You can't simp.
Well, this is the big conundrum we're in right now. Is essentially
which way do we go?
Let's just look at it as it is now. Okay, so decades of feminist, or you could say gynocentric policymaking from before the suffrage movement till today has essentially created a situation where men's obligations have not changed, but women's liberties have, right? So men are in the same position they were before World War I, and if we get to the point and like, you know, it's starting to look that way, right? Yeah, we will be conscripted and expected to die for a country that doesn't actually respect us. And this is going to be a problem because you can see like the rejection of going to war is a good one. Don't get me wrong. Again, I'd rather we didn't have to do that. But the reason behind it being that they're like, why would I die for a country that hates me for what I am, right? Because that's how bad it is today. But here's where the real issue is. You were just talking about this. In order for you to be able to protect something effectively, you must have authority over it.
Yeah.
So, and the issue is that men are expected to essentially be responsible for women, but they have no authority over women.
Yeah. So just a quick example, very quick example. Carolyn Ann Harlos, who is a libertarian, big libertarian, right? I deeply respect her as an LP individual. You know, she works in Colorado. They do amazing work. And she's one of the few people that protected Mises Caucus when there was horrible things going on within the LP, right? Like she is a respected, you know, former treasurer. She's very, very respected in the LP, but she has this one weird feminist weakness, where she keeps coming up and saying, you know, oh, you know, I was on the subway and there was this, you know, homeless man accosting this woman, and where were the men? None of the men stepped in to stop it.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
And it's like, and I don't want to tell her, because I know she's not really part of the problem in voting for the things that did this, because she's a hardcore libertarian. But there's every part of me wants to shake her and go,
but
I'm not going to jail to protect you. Like, fuck off.
Right. She's still a woman, though. This is the thing another thing that we gotta like come to grips with. Like a lot of what we are experiencing does not simply boil down to like, you know, data and incentives and there's nature going on. Women have a nature, and the most libertarian woman and the people who work here at Honey Badger Radio are some of the most hardcore libertarian, like ANCAP women that I've ever known, but they are still women. At the end of the day, there is a nature that comes out that they have to fight against. My wife does it too all the time. And I mean, she's probably more right-wing than me on a lot of stuff. So, I mean, I don't know, not by much, but
if you're the mother of my children and we're in a relationship, I extend that to you the same thing I would extend to my children, which is an extension of my legacy, myself. It's an extension of myself.
Yeah.
But like some random chick on the subway, I'm not gonna fucking go to jail.
Well, of course.
Because I fought a homeless guy and then he ended up dying, and then I go to prison like that blonde.
Yeah, Daniel Penny.
Guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Like it's like you guys wanted this. You wanted a society where the police and the state have ultimate authority, but us as men can no longer live in even the slightest bit of
not even the cops have it. Like that what's going on in New York is a definite byproduct of, you know, a bunch of bad
natural
policies.
extension.
Yeah. So and again, I think there is a unfortunately, despite all of the laws and policy, etc., it boils down to there is a nature in men and a nature in women. It's being expressed. And I think that the reason, I've said this too, and I don't know what your thoughts on this are. I think that in general, there are two wings of politics because there are two sexes. And that's how they are expressed. One of them is more statist, and I think that women tend towards that because there's more security in that. There's more, at least that's the idea. And the other is more like, you know, liberty oriented. And I think that men want that. And I think that that's the reason why men vote more, you know, towards liberty and small government, and women tend to vote towards more big government. And except for this is actually an interesting thing, women who are married and have children are more likely to vote in line with their husbands because they suddenly know like where the taxation is affecting them, whereas a single woman or a single mother doesn't care because she's getting money from the state no matter what.
Too,
yeah, exactly. And they're involved, right?
So Robert Bella has a really good book. Robert Bella's obviously, he's dead. Harvard Press, and unfortunately he didn't get to finish the second. But there's a book called Theory it's Evolution in Religion from the Axial to the from the Paleolithic to the Axial Age. And in it, he discusses the psychology from the very beginning of trying to understand where religions come from, right? Where did the concept of spirituality and the evolution of religion, which is especially important to understanding our current religions, understanding evolutionary monotheism and the Semitic religions, etc. But there is, in the beginning, he talks about, trying to isolate what it is that makes the human species unique compared to other human species, to other primate species, other than just IQ and opposable thumbs. Because something had to come before IQ and opposable thumbs. Like why, like all these other primates have opposable thumbs, but they don't have our IQ. They don't have what we have. What was the spark? And as far as he's concerned, and a bunch of researchers, primate researchers, psychologists, etc., that there is these things that are present within mammals, but only humans have all of them. And it's these four things. One is maternal instincts. The other is paternal instincts, right? So many mammals will have maternal instincts, and some of them, even like bonobos, will have paternal instincts. But in most mammals, you don't have that, right? So you don't have a desire for the man to care for a child and the woman to care for a child as a team, collective, together. And then the other two things are disposition to dominate others, and then a disposition to resent domination. These are kind of the four unique evolutionary building blocks as far as he's concerned as to why we became humans, developed religion, developed society, developed culture, etc. And I think there's some truth to that in this concept that there's a pull between these two seemingly paradoxical values, which is I want to dominate the other and I want things to be in my favor, but I hate the idea of being dominated. And I think that's probably a better explanation for the two political systems of overly enlarged government for security and safety, and then liberty. I think that those things are actually fundamental, not necessarily in a male-female. Now, do I think that female tendencies, and again, this is that issue with humans lacking a heuristic that allows us to see the distribution.
Yeah, it's not an
absolute. I do think that women tend very heavily to favor this disposition to dominate. And I do think men tend to favor this resentment of being dominated, this disposition to resent the idea that I lack liberty. But I think it's a core fundamental thing, and it does kind of Venn diagram a little bit with maternal instincts and because the family life is communist, right? It's everyone gets a fair share, everyone gets opportunities, everyone gets, it's one of the mother's most sacred duties in a family is to ensure that nobody is treated unfairly. And that everybody gets a fair shake. Everybody gets the same opportunity. Everybody's voice is heard, right? That the husband isn't too authoritarian with one child, right? That is what it means to really manage a home. It's more than just having the kids and raising the kids. It also means controlling the man's behavior in the household. That's also part of a woman's duty, I think.
Yeah, sure.
And
except
when you give that political power, that's when it becomes a problem.
But that's actually very useful for people.
It's not scalable. Yeah.
Political power, right? Because they can use. That's what I'm saying. Like we have talked about how on the show, essentially, politicians have turned women into a voting bloc by essentially. That's why, like, when you look at, and it doesn't matter if they're Republicans, Democrats, whatever, even libertarians, they will appeal to women they make that a priority because they don't think that it works if you appeal to men. And in fact, if you try to make an appeal to men, women will become like resentful of that because they want to be the ones.
It's a terrible strategy. It's really just comes down to this, which is that there's one demographic that basically decides the outcome of every single election where it is a toss-up, right? So if you're in a purple district, right, that is white suburban women. That's it.
Yep.
Suburban women. Why? Because women that live in the cities and in the country are already decided. Men are mostly already decided. The one demographic of people that can change from Democrat to Republican, Democrat to Republican, Democrat to Republican in any election is going to be suburban women, particularly white women, white suburban women. If you can get the
middle class women,
right. Well, it's the suburbs is a district where you're not necessarily right wing or left wing. Neither are your friends, right? And so if you can get middle class white Karens to vote for you, you win the election. And you see this with, let's say, Loudoun County and Virginia, where the Republican won won over in Virginia, despite Bloomberg spending hundreds of millions of dollars again to try and swing the state blue. How did all of that money fail and the Republican won? Moms for Liberty and pissed off moms about what's going on in schools, and critical race theory and queer theory in schools was enough to activate suburban white women to go, what the fuck are in these schools? That's crazy. And he won. That's how you win an election. It will always be how you win an election in America until there is significant demographic shift where that block is no longer as valuable, which probably will happen soon. But nevertheless, I mean, now the way that you win elections might be, bringing in a bunch of immigrants and then accidentally having them on voter ID rolls. But, I didn't say that, YouTube.
Somebody in your chat, I'm looking at your chat. Somebody said the name of the baseball player, Trevor Bauer. Just want to give a shout out to Trevor Bauer. Hopefully, that girl.
Shout out for not beating your wife.
For actually shout out for recording everything, which is, something that I guess most men wouldn't think they should be doing, but apparently they should be, especially if they're wealthy and, because they're going to draw kind of like snakes towards them. Also, I used to be a teacher. Somebody mentioned that the same thing about not having authority, but expecting to be responsible, also applies to children. I'm not sure about the home. I think that you can work that out, individually. But I know that in schools, I have done some teaching, and male teachers are so unusual these days. It's like 85% women, maybe higher in the United States.
It's a toxic work environment for a male.
It is. There's a lot of problems.
Unless you're a feminine male.
Again,
if you're feminine, it's different. But if you're a masculine male, it's a toxic place for you to be.
It's probably not. I could probably get a job if I was a drag queen. Let's be real. So if I decided
setting aside your ability to get the job, I just mean it's not a welcoming place for a man to work.
But
anybody that's ever worked in a female dominated profession knows that you're walking on eggshells when you're in that work environment. And they'll tell jokes about their boyfriends and their husbands, and they'll tell jokes about penises and about sex and about all these things. And as a man, don't you fucking get involved in this conversation whatsoever, because the moment you say something in there that offends anyone in that group, your life's over. Your life is gonna be ruined by a sexual harassment charge, despite the fact that they're saying wild shit, because there's a bias there. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad bias. Again, I don't think it's necessarily bad that we let women get away with telling dick jokes, and we're a little bit more careful about dudes saying sexual things to women when there are no other dudes around, right? I think that's probably a good instinct. The problem is when they have power. It's right. You can't have the power and the protection. You can't have both. It's kind of like Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. There is a responsibility if you have that power, but if you get rid of my power, I don't fucking keep the responsibility. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, because I think this is all a problem that comes out of human resources departments and the let's say our tendency to be overly litigious about everything. I frankly think that women and men should be able to joke about whatever they want. I think that there is such a thing as, let's say, courtesy to know that you don't just say whatever around whoever. But I don't care if guys want to tell dick jokes. I really because
what I mean to say is very quick. I think it is a good instinct that we think something's wrong with a Don Draper Mad Men work environment where you walk in to go tell your boss about something real quick and he slaps you on the ass and calls you sugar tits, right? You don't want that environment for women. And so the way that you stop that environment is that you have to stop it before it starts, which means you have to be overly protective of the females in that environment. The difference is when the females run the HR departments and it's all the women that are the mediators and judiciary as part of this process. You can't have patriarchal protection run by women, because what you have now is a pseudo patriarchy that is actually a matriarchy masquerading as a patriarchy that gives us all of the bad shit, all of the responsibility, and none of the ability to actually discriminate or be honest or engage in reality.
I think that comes with other problems. I mean, I don't think men want to work in an environment like that. So because if they have to be on eggshells, and we just talked about that, it's not worth it. And HR departments and sexual harassment and stuff like that.
That's what I mean. The reason we're on eggshells is because women run it, and there's that protective instinct.
Exactly. So then we are essentially getting the results from what was perhaps started in earnest. But then that like brings another question. Another thing that I advocate a lot for is that what men need. So we have this problem where a boy comes into this world, and he probably gets circumcised, and then he is probably raised by a single mom, which means he is probably more likely to be exposed to abuse, and then he goes into a school, and all of his teachers are women, almost all of them. There are no men in his vicinity, except for maybe the security guards, if it's in a rough area, and he goes to university, and all this time he's getting a feminist education, because not just public education, all education is feminist, like all of it, with charter schools, Catholic schools, private schools, it's military schools, all of it. Our military is feminist. I mean, so he is surrounded by this ideology. He's bombarded with it everywhere. And then he turns out to be kind of a mess. I mean, we can't really blame him. So we gotta, what I say is that there has to be something that we can bring to men, young men in particular, boys, as a kind of release valve. And that, for me, this is what I advocate for, is that boys have their own spaces. And every time boys make a space, feminists invade the space because they don't want men coming together. And I have an idea as to why that is, but I can get into it. But I can give you some examples. For example, there used to be men-only clubs. There used to be boys club, the Boy Scouts. Women can join the Boy Scouts now. All of these sort of, male. I was part of a boys club as a kid, and it was good. You go on trips, you learn skills.
Right.
You
have
read
like Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam.
No.
Must read book. It's a little dated. It's more of a history book now than an accurate book. But there's a lot of reasons those men's clubs failed, and it's not just feminists invading the spaces, though that definitely did happen. There's Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam is a seminal piece of work of sociology in understanding where this really started. And it's not feminists that started it. It's the isolation of men from those communities because of World War II and because of the GI Bill and the creation of the suburbs. And all of a sudden we started shopping, working, and living in 3 different areas instead of living together as a community. And there's a kind of an anomie thing where man is separated from the community and separated from his labor because he's, part of a machine, a cog. It's worth a read. You should absolutely read it. It's great.
I mean, that's interesting. But again, men are trying to form communities now, and those still get invaded and broken up by feminists.
D&D,
so even though,
right? Like,
whatever it is, that
were traditionally dude spaces.
Yep.
You can't be in them anymore.
The men never said women couldn't join. It wasn't like a men only thing. It's just they let some women in, and some of them were enthusiastic. Like, there are girl gamers and girl nerds that are legitimate, but then it becomes a bigger space because the men invest time and energy into it. And then it gets broken up because they're like, well, we're in here and we don't like any of this stuff. And I think there's another reason for it, though. I think that the one thing that it seems like, because we're not just talking about like activist groups and like, meddling women that get involved. We're talking about government organizations. We're talking about the Department of Homeland Security. We're talking about the FBI. Yeah. They go into forums. They go into, these male spaces, and they observe and they nudge and they like meddle with that. And I think the reason ultimately is, and I think this should go in line because I believe this, and I also have libertarian leanings myself, like pretty strong ones. The biggest threat to the government are independent men with families, because those men who think for themselves, they're more likely to want to have their own guns, are more likely to be pro. I do. I think, and if they're married and they have kids, firstly, they're invested in the future because they have children. Secondly, their wife is going to be on their side and they're going to work together. I think that is like a man who is atomized and has no prospects, right? And has no future and is told that he's a piece of shit is dangerous for himself, but also for the people around him, because that's where you get like these kind of, you know, suicidal, violent, self-destructive guys.
Those would be a
right?
bigger, I think those would be a bigger threat to the government than atomized family, because I think
No.
I think
they'd be a threat to regular people, not the government, like to other families.
They'd be a threat to both. I think there's a double side, there's a flip side to that coin, right? I do agree with you that atomized conservative men are more likely to become activists, to engage, you know, in a peaceful resistance kind of way and get together a larger mass of people and be able to change opinions and hearts and minds, etc. But there's a double side. It's a double-sided kind of situation. And the flip side would be that, like, they have weaknesses, right? They have their family, they have their children. The desire for security, a man that has no family might be nihilistic. He might say, fuck it. Take away my security. Take away something. Put pressure on me. Doesn't fucking matter. But if I've got a wife and kids, all of a sudden I might shut my fucking mouth if there's some type of threat towards them. You know what I mean? I can use those things against you. Those are weaknesses against you. Whereas a lone wolf kind of guy that goes into a group made up of a bunch of other people is absolutely more dangerous to society than he is to the government. But I would still say he's probably also far more dangerous to the government than the atomized family man. I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily.
No, I don't mean an atomized family man. I mean like a community of families that are intact, and they're all talking to each other, like men talking to each other, sharing ideas, showing each other skills and whatnot. That's serious stuff, man. I mean, isn't that basically the founding fathers? Were they just like a bunch of chads like hanging out and like shooting at
it's actually a bunch of teenage
yeah
kids, they're all like 19 to like 24, but like but the thing is that like I think sometimes we kind of like anthropomorphize the state, we humanize the state, we give the state like this like Machiavellian kind of tendencies, that there's like the deep state, that there's this plan, right? And I think more often than not, what it really is it's a monopoly on power and violence, and it is kind of just how it's disassociated ideology that, when put together, has a life of its own. Like, I don't know that the state is like, I don't know that the FBI, for example, is like the biggest threat to the corporate interests is like men Discord servers talking to each other, right? But there's like this incentive structure where it's like the FBI has to, validate their job. And so because I have to validate my job, I have to catch terrorists, right? Well, how do I catch terrorists? Well, the way that I catch terrorists is I go and embed myself in communities, and then I push and nudge them almost to the brink of action, so that then I can stop that action, so I can go, look, I stopped the terrorist. Because it's way, way, way harder to track down the real terrorist that's already planning secretly. It's way easier to push groups and mentally ill people and things like that towards, you know what I mean? Like it's a bunch of shit like that. So I think it's less about what is a threat to the state and more about understanding the incentive structures that the cathedral as a whole, the media, academic institutions, the kind of like global organizations like the World Economic Forum, and our government institutions and the bureaucracy, what incentive structures kind of push them in certain directions, and then understanding that we have this blob with an insane amount of power and unlimited funds because they have the capacity and the means to tax. And then I think we get a better understanding of how the state operates. I think we too often try and humanize it because we need an evil thing, and we need the idea of like an evil person with motives. The state doesn't have motives. The state has incentives.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. It's got incentives to essentially make itself relevant, keep relevant, right? But like this works on women. How does the state do that for women? Essentially, especially women on welfare. That's basically why there are women on welfare. This was all like, the plan of the Great Society, right? Lyndon Johnson. But then like, what
Social
is
Security too? Is
Social Security too, and all
Well,
and
with
like
Social
now
Security-
Obamacare, whatever it is.
Yeah, with Social Security, for example, people don't think of Social Security as a means of splitting apart families, but it absolutely is. Because if Social Security exists, then there's no excuse for you not to be able to pay child support. If Social Security exists, then there's no excuse to not be able to kick your grandparents and other people out of your community, out of your home, out of the mother's suite in your backyard, and having a separate house for your mother. Social Security is the very beginning of the social safety net that begins to destroy families, because it gets rid of the grandparents, and then it gets rid of the concept that you and I have to put our money together, save it together, invest in it together, so that we can retire together. And so Social Security really is the beginning of the destruction of the family. It's not even welfare, and it's not even child support. It really all starts with Social Security.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So
I gotta
then
get out of here
I
soon,
think,
but
yeah, I know.
yeah,
Me, that's
we got
okay.
debate.
I gotta go soon too. I know you got another debate coming up, but that basically is in line with what I'm saying. I think that you're right. If it breaks up the family, then it benefits the state, not because they're going after it, but they're just trying to get whatever. Essentially say you need us because we give you Social Security. You need us because we give you welfare. We give you food stamps. We give you housing. We give you a cell phone, your Obama phone, whatever. But then what that says is if there is a family that is intact and it's in a community, and there are, look at the Amish, for example, right? Like there's like massive extended families and they're very anti-government. They're not necessarily the model that I would go, but like they're a good example of how it can be done. And I don't think the state is a big problem for them.
There is a YouTube video called, I think it's called like Dinner with the Amish or something, like something close to that. You should be able to find it. There is a misnomer, and it is a lie that has been spread by the left. It is a sneaky little fucking thing where people think of the Amish as Pennsylvania Dutch horse and buggy carriage. The overwhelming majority of Amish, Beachy Amish, and Mennonites are people that use cell phones, that have houses, that have electricity. For some reason, some of them don't have porches. Like, there are some weird shit there, but they are the most libertarian, most conservative, happiest, most successful communities. And people go, well, you don't want to live like the Amish because you don't want to have like no electricity. Right. But it's actually, no, you do want to live like the Amish. The Beachy Amish is some of the greatest way that you could live in a community where you're actually engaged. And
right. And they don't, like, they're not affected by the incentive structure because they don't need it. And they have it all figured out. And I agree with you. I mean, I shop at an Amish grocery store. I think it's in Blacksburg or Christiansburg, which is like a nearby town. Yeah. And they use cell phones and cash registers and the internet and all that. So, but okay. Anyway, Fabian, thank you so much. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to say before, we take off. Any like final words? I'll end the show there.
No, it's fine. Like I said, I have, I'm going to go on here and, take a pee break and go debate against, lefties about whether or not Nazism is socialism. It is. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, we know.
And right. And,
I got, like I said, I got permanently banned from Twitter. My account, I never got it back. It was when Jack Dorsey was still running it. And I said,
I've never been banned by Twitter.
I said, something to the effect of Nazism and communism are all leftism, and people they flipped out at me. And I was like, dude, just do the research. Like, just trust me.
But yeah, if you ever want to talk again, hit me up or whatever. I'd love to talk men's issues or libertarianism. Or if you really want to get into like we can go into my sphere and really go into deep libertarian philosophy and stuff too. I'd love to talk with you about it too. Whatever.
Sounds good. Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And again, I just want to say this, for the record, this is the level of discourse that we try to stay at when we talk about men's issues, because we're looking at a big picture here. This isn't just about like a guy trying to get a date. This is like way more than that. But unfortunately, the stuff that,
but also
gets traction. Well, yeah, with not a lot of women, but we do have some women over here. So, anyway, thanks,
boy. I don't care.
Thanks so much, guys, for hanging out on the show. I'm gonna ask that you like, share, subscribe, and comment, and we'll talk to you all in the next one. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Peace. All right, boys. Let some music on. Actually, hold on. We will go to All right. I need to use the restroom real quick, and then I will be right back so I can hop in the Discord and go into the debate. So stay tuned, get a drink, get a snack. When we come back, we'll be hopping in onto the debate panel. Because there is an incentive whenever we go to the bathroom to wash our hands as quickly as possible, because every second that we're away is 1 second is more opportunity to lose viewers, right? So like I lost, the discussion peaked at around 37, and then it started to really just kind of go down and hover around 29, 28, because people felt the discussion wrapping up. And then, then it got to all the way down to 22 because I was gone and I was peeing. Right now it's down to 21 because I had to go pee. So the quicker I wash my hands, the quicker I can get back to you guys and not lose viewers because you're not engaged. Because I'll lose, you'll lose a third of your viewers going to the restroom. So I just have like a billion different random AI photos that I like, or don't like, or that I grabbed, or that some of them I made, some of them I just found. So it's just random AI shit. But yeah, so I wash them, but I know plenty, I'm sure, that don't wash their hands, and when they do wash their hands, it's very quick. I'm not doing that surgery thing where I'm washing up to my elbows and really getting in there like I should. So just throwing that out there. I guess I go in here. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. Hold on. What TED Talks? Don't add hominem. I'm going to add hominem. I'm just looking at the server rules, and one of them is don't add hominem. I'm definitely going to do that.
Made a video about this exact subject, and I'm like, oh, I guess this is a thing. What's good, Scott?
Howdy.
Well, I'm gonna move us to the closed room soon, so I'll just move us there now.
All right.
That way I can get it all set up and whatnot. Yeah, looks good.
Roofers. What does that mean?
Vigilante, I haven't seen you in ages. It feels like. Have we? No, I have seen you recently. Where have I seen you? You were on one of the first real panels I ever
Shogun really
participated
that
on.
good?
We argued.
Yes.
Remember? I remember that was way back. That was like over a year ago.
I haven't watched it yet.
Yes,
Shogun
that was
good?
a while ago.
Yeah.
Vigilante's been around.
Well, it's good to see you, man. How have you been?
Pretty good. How have you been?
I'm doing okay. You know, summer's coming. So
Is my audio good?
Sound great.
Yep, you sound fine, Scott.
Beard's on point. Good to go. Anybody else jumping yet? Still got 4 minutes, so that works out. Oh God, Nazis. It's always Nazis.
You know that politics is full of them? I had no idea. I popped into a room the other day in politics. It was just some random room. I just wanted to sit back and listen to people yell at each other while I was like, I don't know, like grading stuff. And I popped in, and people like were unironically saying like actual Nazi shit in there. I was shocked. Actual shit. Like one person started arguing for the supremacy of the German race. I was like, hang on, can I just ask you, are you a Nazi actually? He said yes.
As a matter of fact.
As a matter of fact, I am.
I mean, you kind of expect it, right? I mean, as politics becomes more polarizing and as people start to overuse a word, then, you know, people are going to adopt that word more and more. And then what's going to happen also is you're going to have this, the more you have this kind of like non-platforming attitude and the more people are unwilling to have debates, you're going to see less and less pushback against Nazism because people aren't actually having the debate. And then worse, what's going to happen is certain people that are susceptible to being pushed towards that ideology are going to begin to associate Nazism with truth because there are certain truths that become uncomfortable for anybody else to speak. And so they will say, well, these are the people that have the balls to say the thing that nobody else will say. And then when they take those kind of minor, you know, those kind of introductory things onto Facebook or Twitter or wherever, you know, like, oh, hey, immigration's a problem. And then someone's like, fuck you, you Nazi, right? Like they will begin to think, oh, Nazi means truth teller. Nazi means I have the balls to say the thing that no one else is willing to say. And then eventually they say crazy shit, you know, like, blonde hair, blue eyes is, you know, markers of the superior race, right? And then people call them a Nazi, but it's like, yeah, that's the same shit you said to me when I said that like this immigration problem needed to be fixed. So like, it's the same thing to them. It just means truth. So, I mean, I think especially for the left, it's important to have these types of panels and these types of discussions because without them, you just unironically create a pipeline to Nazism.
I can't disagree with you on that. Things have to be talked about. You want to disagree with me
so bad.
I really cannot.
Yeah.
I'm in the fucking void.
Welcome, non-smoker.
Hello. What's
My
up?
man's is in the void.
Yes, yeah. You heard that,
Hi,
huh?
everybody. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Pretty good.
Nice not smoker. Have we met before?
I don't know. Have we?
I don't know. You're not cammed up. I can't tell. But if we have, hello. It's good to. It's nice to meet you. If we haven't met before.
I don't think you
Nice
guys,
to meet you
guys
too.
have been on a panel together before. Not that I've seen, at least.
I've missed non-smoker. I'm glad to have him on.
Yeah, I just got to get my fucking cam to work. Hold on, sorry.
One day.
OBS or Streamlabs?
OBS.
Turn on the virtual camera. Makes it so much easier.
Hold on, sorry.
Someone
I've
always
never
has
figured
tech
out how to get that to work properly.
There's always a tech problem from somebody whenever we do a panel.
It says I can't stream into this channel.
Hold on, let me make sure you got roles. Okay, you should have roles now. You should be good.
Look how it was Guy's fault.
Of course it was my fault. Might have to leave and come back for it to work properly.
Yeah. Hang on.
Gee.
Yeah, I haven't had non-smoker on in a hot minute, so
Wow, Kai. Really? You're gonna have like a Nazi server? Is that what this is? You have like fascist rules for how you like run this place?
well, yeah, for the most part.
Figures you'd host the Nazi panel, so of course you've got the Nazi rules to go with it.
I mean, I got to be consistent.
Absolutely.
We live in a society, from what I hear.
Listen, a society where every person must be a part of society. Everyone must contribute equally, okay? This is the way of the Fourth Reich.
There we go. Had me dying when the politics servers. Like, what do you expect? There's always going to be Nazis in there.
I didn't know. Look, I usually don't go there. I like to go into VCs where people are screaming about like.
Oh, hold on.
crazy
You went
shit.
to Doobie's politics Discord? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the one with 80,000 people. In it.
Yeah, it's always got
Always
Nazis
nuts.
in there, man. Fucking.
One time I ran into
What
Dark
is it- what is
Dawkins. It was fucking awesome.
He calls them. Doobie calls them. Oh God, what does he call them? Nazi wizards or whatever.
The Nazi.
No, he calls them Nazi wizards because there's like certain people that have like a magically charismatic effect to try and like draw people into their other Discord servers, and it's like they're just there to like work their magic and get them over to the dark side.
All right, so going live. Since we got all the peoples. Bomb. What's good, Gibbs? Lactoid, good to see you. This is your fault, Gibbs.
I know, right? It's a good problem to have.
Are we missing people?
I don't believe so. Let me double check.
One person dipped out.
Yeah, I think we're missing somebody.
He had a severe case of bursitis.
Yeah.
No, we got everyone.
Radicus, Overlord Cly, and iCal. These three
Oh,
people.
those three will not be in. Rich might show up later, but yeah, otherwise.
So many weenies, non-smoker. Why are like everybody in your team weenies? Can you explain?
I don't know. Sucks. I'm used to it though.
You don't know who iCal Rich is, Scott?
No.
You're on a panel with him damn near
you're just
every
Rich.
Monday.
Well, you just said Rich. I thought I was thinking someone else.
Yes, that Rich. All right. Now, I was hoping to have more socialists, but sometimes they're a bit recalcitrant to talk. I don't know.
That's a very, very polite way of saying weenie. I just want to
It's okay. As far as I'm concerned, you're all fucking socialists. So there you go.
Well, we fixed the problem. We got vigilante, so everything's going to be all right. Non-smoker's not by himself. Although I think he could handle it just fine. I've seen him work.
I'm actually about to give you one of the biggest compliments, non-smoker. I think you're probably the least weenie lefty I've ever met. So I'm going to give you that. Big props.
Thank you. You're a nice guy too.
Excellent. So let's get it poppin'. Welcome, one and all, to the Minds of the Ecclesia panel. I am your host, Lethy Water Kai, and with me I have some great guests that I will allow to introduce themselves, starting with Admiral Gibbs.
Hey, I'm Admiral Gibbs. Here to make lefties cry. That's it.
And for the first time, Scott.
Hey, I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty. Pretty much everywhere you can find me. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I'm sure you probably see me around somewhere if you watch these panels all the time. And I'm the crazy asshole ANCAP, the final boss of libertarianism. So check me out. Look at the YouTube or Discord or whatever if you want to talk philosophy or just talk shit.
That's why I was hearing boss music. That explains everything.
Mm-hmm.
And with us, Fairy Queen.
Hi guys.
Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, Kai. And hi everybody. You can find me at Fairy Queen's Cottage on YouTube and at Fairy_Queen on Twitter. I am here to make everyone angry. That's my goal, to make every single person very, very angry tonight. So
Ooh, that's a feat. Let's go. And we have the man, the myth, the legend, Lactoid.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Lactoid, you can find me at Lactoid TV. on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Awesome. And with us, we have been graced with non-smoker.
Yeah, twitch.tv/non-smoker, Marxist, Leninist, anti-imperialist.
Awesome. And the man that needs no introduction, the vigilante.
I've been on here like what 6 weeks in a row now. I don't think I need to introduce myself again.
All right. Today we have one of the most pressing questions at hand. Were Nazis socialist? The socialism in Nazism. Among the almost uniformly liberal historians of Nazi Germany, Rainer Zittelmann stands apart. After a youthful phase of left-wing politics, he has been a lifelong conservative and staunch defender of capitalism who has once had his car torched by the far left. Though he holds doctorates in history and sociology, much of his distinguished career has been spent not on universities but publishing, public relations, and journalism. Zittelmann is, in the self-description of the greatest scholar of the Spanish Civil War, Hugh Thomas, a historian in private practice. His work embraces not only the study of German history, but that of wealth creation. In his popular books about the psychology of the super-rich attitudes toward the wealthy, Zittelmann investigates a group of people who have seldom received objective analysis. The rich, it seems, really are different, nonconformist, intuitive, competitive, with the resilience to survive setbacks. Some of these character traits that mark out the billionaires serve them well, but also intimidate others. Using opinion surveys, Zittelmann has demonstrated that Americans and British tend to treat the contrarian individuals with pragmatism and even admiration, rather than the social envy and hostility that predominate elsewhere. He shows that the proportion of social enviers is much higher in France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. It may or may not be coincidence that over the past century, the latter countries have shown a stronger proclivity for the politics of the extreme left and right, especially in the shape of charismatic leaders who present themselves as tribunes of the people, crusading against plutocratic elites. So we're going to try to figure out today where the Nazis land in this idea. And let's go with opening statements. Go with Gibbs first.
Yeah, so I think what's happened over time is there's been a very big push by the left to revise history. And that is to make things like, say, like the Nazis are not leftist socialists, when they very clearly are, because they don't like the sticky, icky fact that, they were racist bastards. When in fact, if you look throughout history at people like Karl Marx, for example, you can't have communism without racism. Just because he's the founder of it. It's all intertwined. It's all deeply ingrained. Therefore, like that is not a deciding factor in regards to whether they're a socialist government or not. When we look at other chief executives within the Nazi power structure, especially people like Goebbels, it's pretty clear whenever he's saying things like socialism is the ideology of the future. To be a socialist is to submit the I to the thou. Socialism is sacrificing the individual to the whole. Socialism is the deepest sense of service. Like things like this, we are the workers' party, removing the Burgeois for the workers' class. All these things, these are all typical socialist talking points that he clearly, truly believed in, as well as many of the other people, if you look at throughout the Nazi party going on. Now, they did, of course, have like some disagreements with different factions, and they took them out. But as socialists tend to do, once they get in power, they become authoritarian. And I think it's pretty clear to me that they are socialists, as we'll see going forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Gibbs. Scott?
So the question is, are the Nazis, or I guess were the Nazis, right? Not talking about modern Nazis per se, were the Nazis socialist? There really isn't any good answer here to say that they aren't socialist. I don't think you can be, honest and be an honest, good faith actor and say that they're not socialist. And the reason I would say that is really the question is, what is socialism? Right? Because if you're trying to understand whether or not the Nazis are socialists, then you have to go, okay, well, what do you mean by socialist? And this is where like things get a little funny. So, I mean, are we talking about like kind of the original French understanding of socialism before Marxism hits the table? Well, then like kind of like liberal democracy is socialism. And like, most movements that are anti-monarchy are socialism. Are we talking about kind of Marx, Engels, vulgar classic Marxism idea of socialism? Well, there's no argument from that perspective that it's not socialism because, we're talking about the historical dialectical materialism, this kind of like this marching on away from the contradictions of capitalism and the kind of the the crisis of economies and the crisis of imperialism that is occurring within Europe at that time, it absolutely meets any kind of vulgar Marxist definition of socialism by being that. It doesn't matter that it's not left wing. And then we have this kind of more modern interpretation that we get along with the Soviet Union and things like that, well, socialism is actually just this transitory state, as Marx described, but it has to have these certain characteristics, these certain qualities. And the problem with that kind of final boss definition of socialism is that whatever definition they pick will either get rid of all of the socialist countries and societies that have existed, or it will include Nazi Germany, right? Like, I've heard this, it becomes a game of that's not real socialism. It's like, oh, well, the Soviet Union, that's not real socialism because that was state capitalism. Or, oh, China, that wasn't real socialism because, on contradiction, actually was directly antagonistic, and the dialectic isn't actually understood there. And, critical consciousness was not allowed for. So it's not real socialism. Oh, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, that's not real socialism because it was a farmers' protest. And they said that we were revolutionaries, not communists. Oh, Cuba, oh, that was real socialism. Oh, you found out that all of our shit is bullshit. Oh, well, Che and, and all of the socialist leaders there, they weren't socialist leaders. They weren't thinkers. They weren't trained Marxists. Anytime you pick a solid, positive position on what socialism is, the facts will always show that the Nazi Party, the NSDAP, was socialist. And to deny that because of hierarchy or privatization is just to play funny games with words instead of just admitting reality. That the Nazis were socialists. They were an economic left-wing movement with some right-wing tendencies to it, and that's really all it is.
Thank you, Scott. Fairy Queen.
So this is the part where, so I'm both going to agree and maybe disagree. I don't know if I disagree with Scott, but I think I do disagree with Gibbs. To explain why, this is why. So I think that it's just true. I think that if you look at the definition of socialism, and we can talk about the different definitions that exist, but essentially the idea that all people should be able to jointly use, share, and receive the benefits from both natural resources and goods and services that are collectively produced. I think it's undeniable that Nazi Germany, that is what National Socialism attempted to achieve by its the policies that it attempted to institute, by the rhetoric that was used throughout the party. And so I think that, and we can get more into it throughout our discussion tonight, but I do think it's undeniable that Nazi Germany, the National Socialism, yes, it was actually socialism. It wasn't simply a denial of it. But this is the part where I disagree with Gibbs. And this is actually one thing I want to talk about tonight. What I disagree with, why are we asking this question? The ask of the question is well, if you can prove, that in fact Nazi Germany, that National Socialism is actually socialism, then it lies the feet of the terrors of Nazi Germany during the 1940s at the feet of the left, is the point. The point of the ask of that question is to sort of pin the Holocaust on the left side of the political spectrum and not on the right, which is the reason why these conversations come up over and over and over again. It's the same reason why people have arguments over whether or not, the Democrat Party or the Republican Party really supported slavery in the United States. It's a gotcha moment. And so my caveat to Gibbs, at least, I don't know if Scott or if Flactor, if the other people will disagree. I think that it was certainly socialism, but what I disagree with Gibbs on is the idea that because it's socialism, that means that it wasn't conservative. I think that there's plenty of evidence to show that just because of the fact that it happens to happen, just because National Socialism is socialism, that doesn't mean that it isn't conservative in nature. That the politics behind it wasn't conservative. That the intent behind it did not have conservative traits throughout the arguments. And we can get more into it later, but that's sort of what I wanted to discuss more. It's a little bit like the word postmodern. It's typically, that's a dog whistle, and what it means is far left person when you say that somebody is indulging in a postmodern style of thought. But it's not true that leftists or people who are left leaning are the only people who can be postmodern. There absolutely are conservatives and people who are right leaning who can also be postmodern. And I think the same is true of of socialism. I don't think it's true that I don't think it's true that that socialism is merely the property of the left. I think it is possible for somebody to be a conservative and to also be a socialist or to support socialist policies. And so that's my position for tonight. So
Awesome. Thank you. Lactoid.
Okay, so I think for most of the Nazi Party's existence that we care about, which is primarily during World War II, I think that the Nazi Party was undeniably third way, in that there is going to be some major significant distinctions between how the Nazis ran the country, from what we would deem to be socialism now, and especially what we would deem to be any kind of free market economy. Initially, the Nazi Party was undeniably anti-capitalist, leftist, socialist, as much as you can define it, right? Gottfried Feder was the economic advisor for the Nazi Party in the beginning. He's actually the person who brought Hitler into the party. He was an avowed anti-capitalist. He saw capitalism as being part of the Jewish conspiracy, right, in order to undermine labor. And there's a whole bunch of people. And the Night of the Long Knives was really the point in which those elements were pushed out. But there's another element that was pushed out around the same time, a little bit later, but not too far off, that most people don't pay attention to, which was there was also a free market element in the Nazi Party that was pushed out as well by Hitler when they weren't coming to terms with him. So, there's a couple names that I'm sure we're going to talk about, and include in high positions like the economic minister. They were pushed out when they were saying, "Hey, we shouldn't be having so much state control of the economy." Of course, that didn't serve Hitler's purposes, so they got rid of them. So the third way here is there's elements of both that the Nazi Party rejected, and there was elements of both that the Nazi Party also accepted. The big thing that leftists point to when they're saying that Nazi Germany was not socialist was the fact that there was mass privatization. And there was, right? It's pretty undeniable. There was a lot of state industries that were developed during the Weimar Republic that were sold off by the Nazi Party as soon as they gained power. However, it's important to look at where those industries went, right? The privatization occurred. It was sold into the hands of large corporate conglomerates that had direct alliances with the Nazi Party. Reichswerk was one example of this. It was actually the largest company in Europe at the end of World War II, directly controlled by the Nazi Party, and it was a conglomerate of a whole bunch of other companies that were, again, in direct allegiance to the Nazi Party. Stock markets were closed en masse as they were seen as Jewish. In fact, it dropped by roughly 70%. Wages were frozen, unions were abolished, but we had rent controls and price controls, and the government closed all corporations that had less than 40K and mandated that all new corporations have $200,000 equivalent or more, and that the new ones join Nazi Party-led conglomerates. So I think that this is a tale of, the Nazi Party wasn't particularly focused on the rights of the worker or the rights of the entrepreneur. They were primarily focused on the right or the power of the party, right? They wanted to disadvantage the state and disadvantage business to simply subsume everything into the Nazi Party, to exact complete control and subsumation of all power and land in Europe. So it was 100% big government. And I don't think that there's really any comparison in contemporary America today to the Nazi Party. I think too often that happens where people are just like, "Oh, you're a Nazi because you think this or whatever." I think that a lot of socialist policies are Nazi-ish, especially the ones being proposed now. But I don't think there's any real comparison.
All right, thank you for that. Non-smoker.
Yeah, I think the first point of attack on this for me would be sort of just picking apart the actual question and the relevance of it. Like, honestly, what's the point we're trying to make here? Like, are we trying to ultimately associate all modern left-wing movements with Nazi Germany the same way that leftists often associate all right-wing movements with Nazi Germany? Like, all political discourse has this serious issue these days with like reductio ad Hitlerum. Like, it always comes back to Hitler and Nazi Germany. Every fucking discussion about politics, Hitler, Nazis, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi. It's not a very useful way of discussing things, right? Because I think the problem is when it comes to things like fascism, which are poorly defined, and Nazism, which are relatively poorly defined, political theories, we only have to go by what reality was. And the fact is, we've never seen anything like Nazi Germany since, thank God. But I will say this, it's pretty obvious to me that this is often an argument made by like retard level fucking PragerU people to try and say like, oh, well, this is why you shouldn't have healthcare because actually the Nazis had healthcare. It's fucking really brain dead. And a lot of the people on this panel are too smart to buy into that. I'm kind of surprised that, they're going down that route. But I'm just going to point out some obvious truths here. The Nazis came to power partially by persecuting leftists of all varieties, communists, social democrats, labor leaders. Those were the primary groups that they rose in opposition to. Those groups had a ton of political clout during the Weimar era in Germany. Pretty obvious to me that when we try to figure out what is or isn't socialist, Scott is totally right. Socialism is a massive fucking umbrella term. So what you should do is isolate its historical development in a particular time and place. So what was socialism in Germany? Well, socialism was extremely popular in Germany. It had a ton of political representation, and the Nazis rose up pretty much to be a reaction to that and successfully pushed all of those elements out of government, took complete control. And then as Lactoid mentioned, many of what they did was, yes, economic central planning and economic central control. But was the Nazi system any more centrally controlled than any other wartime government or wartime economy? The fact is, these guys who, Lactoid and Fabian, to them, anything that involves regulation or government is practically socialism. So by that logic, it's like, okay, well, if everything is socialism, nothing is socialism. So, to me, it's important to make distinctions, what is or isn't, right? And it's clear to me that the socialist movement, the real socialist movement in Germany and Italy for that matter, were crushed by these far-right movements. That's why industrialists supported them. Industrialists not only from Italy and Germany, by the way, but also Britain and the United States. So, I don't know. I mean, this should be an interesting discussion, but yeah, that's the basics of my view.
Thank you for that. Vigilante.
Okay, so when we talk about this, we also have to consider like which political spectrum we're viewing this from. So like if we're because like when people talk about this, they aren't really thinking about how complicated the political spectrum is. So like if we're talking about like from just the purely from the economic axis, I mean they're gonna fall closer to the center. Because they had a hybrid system between capitalism and socialism. If we're looking at it from the libertarian authoritarian axis, they're obviously going to be all the way at the top or to the far right, because they were extremely authoritarian. The reality of the situation comes down to the fact that Nazi Germany utilized the version of fascism that was created by Benito Mussolini, which is based off of Sorelian reformist Marxism. But the problem with that is the way that Sorel created his version of reformist Marxism is it basically got rid of all of the key elements of Marxism, the abolishment of private property, and like all of the core elemental beliefs of Marxism, to the point where it basically wasn't Marxist anymore. It was a lot closer to social democracy. And in short, the Nazis were basically no different than like modern American capitalism, where we have basically socialism for the rich, except in Nazi Germany it was more socialism for the Aryans.
All right, thank you for that. So, one of the main questions we have to ask ourselves is, back in the 1930s, what would somebody have said if they were defining National Socialism? And does this bear out to be true socialism? I'm going to go ahead and open up the conversation.
Well, they probably would have. It depends where you're asking. If you mean in Germany, they probably, had they heard of Hitler's party, they probably would have referred to the Nazi party. Like that's the thing. we talk about a lot of times we talk about like political theory, and we have this idea that like there's a bunch of systems that we could just choose from. And the fact is, like, these things develop naturally, right, from their given context and their given time period. So what you had in Germany through the 20s and the 30s were a bunch of left-wing parties and then a bunch of conservative parties. And you had the National Socialists rise up essentially as a reaction to the dominant sort of political trend of socialism in Germany. And they attempted to adopt, even right down to the name, many of those ideals to try to capture the support of workers, all while being heavy critics of the government in Germany under, different socialist groups. What?
I think he lost his sound.
So
I want to go after Fabian.
yeah, so just a couple of things. So the concept that like social democracy isn't really socialism, I find silly, because even Engels stated that like we should be leery in socialism, utopic and scientific, of doing too many revolutions in Europe, because there was a real possibility of social democracy in Europe, and that it would be better for the Marxist movement to focus revolutions elsewhere. So again, the process from a Marxist perspective of what is socialism, as kind of as Non-Smoker was saying, is that process away from capitalism and away from industry, and for the people, over time, because there are these inherent contradictions in capitalism. So, I kind of just take issue with vigilantes, kind of like idea of dismissing the very things that even Engels himself was saying positively as a form of socialism. Another thing I want to say is there is this assumption that Lactoid and others kind of touched on, that they weren't really, they were in for socialism in name only, that there was nothing that they were really doing for the worker per se. And I just find that to be just ahistorical, right? So the Germany's Ministry of Labor had a set of a list of offenses that you could be fined for, or that you could absolutely have all of your property taken away from you if you exploited the worker. And these included minimum wage laws, overtime protection, mandated vacations, reduction of hours. You had to provide meals and breaks. You had laws against it being too hot or too cold. You had factory beautification efforts. You had laws against cleanliness. There was a massive amount of state regulation to protect the worker from the exploitation of the capitalists, because of the inherent contradictions in capitalism and the need for like this large state. Also, the other thing too is there's this kind of throwaway thing though. Well, the industrialists, the capitalists were supporting the Nazis. Yeah, sure. Some industrialists and capitalists were supporting Nazis, just as has occurred in literally every socialist revolution. There have been some people that are industrialists, some people that are capitalists and we're seeing it today within socialist left-wing movements today, where there are plenty of corporations. I mean, that's the entire idea behind DEI, or the idea of like stakeholder capitalism from the World Economic Forum, is this blending of industry and capital with left-wing economic policies that creates socialist movements as they move further and further left. And lastly, if you think those regulations were bullshit, so from Ted Richer, Hitler's Revolution 2014, pages 80 to 81, quote, "The record of court proceedings for 1939 demonstrates that the labor law primarily safeguarded the well-being of employees rather than their overseers. During that year, the courts conducted 14 hearings against workers and 153 against plant managers, assistant managers, and supervisors. In 7 cases, the directors lost their jobs." So I think it's very clear that and lastly, the the Nazis got more of their money from membership dues than they ever did from industrialists. So I think those kind of just those little bits of data, I think, dispel some of those myths here, that the Nazis weren't a left-wing socialist party that happened to have a few right-wing ideals. And again, if we start to get specific with our definition of socialism, what you will find is that in order to get Nazism out, you have to get rid of all the other socialist movements at some point.
Go ahead, Non-Smoker.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, a couple things there. The Nazis and workers, and the idea that the Nazi Party never gave back to workers. I think it's kind of important to point out, Nazi Germany sort of got through the war because it sustained itself on fucking slave labor, right? Like work camps where people were forced to work, right? So in terms of, well, you know, I know you want to make that comparison, but not everything can be, you know, excused away by, well, the Soviet Union had gulags. It's a little different than fucking the massing of people into concentration camps based solely on race. Right. So, in other words, the Nazis took large segments of the population, many of whom were working class people, and fucking enslaved them on the basis of their race.
That's not an argument.
But
That's
second
not
of
an
all,
argument.
hold on,
You gotta let him finish.
Let me
though.
finish.
Germany.
Just let me
You gotta
finish.
let him
Just let me finish.
You gotta let him
Second
finish,
of all,
Yeah,
they
no, I'm just telling
persecuted
him to make a
labor
fucking
leaders and they liquidated fucking unions, thus eliminating any democratic control workers had over their workplace. Right. And look, this whole notion that I'm kind of forgetting the last point I made because I'm annoyed about it being cut off thing. That's how that works usually. But look, the idea that the Nazis did only good for workers or whatever, and that's, that was it, the industrialists, right? Sorry. So the important thing about the industrialists and their support of both the Nazi Party and the fascists in Italy is that they chose to support the fascists in Italy and Nazi Germany against socialist movements in those countries. They funded those movements to stop socialism for the benefit of big international capital. That's the whole fucking point, right? You didn't see industrialists of that nature support Lenin and the Bolsheviks, not in the same way, perhaps from Germany, but it was to undermine the Russian Empire, right? It's not at all the same to say that, well, industrialists today like George Soros supports socialist fucking NGOs or whatever. It's not the same as fucking, you know, international capital supporting the rise of Mussolini, funding his fucking newspaper, or supporting the fucking Nazis and German industrialists urging Hindenburg to make Hitler fucking chancellor. It's totally fucking different.
Not to mention
very quick response. Yeah, very, very quick response. So first
And
of
then
all,
Gibbs.
Yeah, they absolutely did, you know, get rid of
And
certain
then
unions
Lactoid
and
after
things like
Gibbs.
that weren't in support of the current socialist power, right? As is common in all socialist countries. And of course, they created the DAF, which is the largest union per capita to ever exist in human history. So I think it's kind of silly to mention that they got rid of unions without also mentioning that they created the largest, most powerful union to ever exist. And I think also, too, it's a little bit disingenuous to say that, well, they're not actually socialists because they're against socialists or that they fought socialist movements, like that didn't happen in Russia. I mean, just one example, 1962, the Novosibirsk, regardless, it's an electric locomotive plant where you have protesters that are protesting against food price hikes and labor conditions, and the USSR shut them down. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, is when I mentioned this.
Dude, they fucking threw the socialists in camps and fucking killed people in mass. They only passed the Enabling Act because they fucking banned communists from being in fucking parliament. How are you going to compare that to the fucking Soviet Union cracking down on some random fucking protest?
Exactly. This is where we're at. We're at where
Dude, you have one little cherry-picked fucking example. The entire existence of Nazi Germany is premised on fighting socialism. Yeah, let the fat idiot talk.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm just very quick response, and then I promise I'll step out and let everybody else talk for a moment. Again,
Scott, by the way, this guy's going to ruin your argument by making you sound dumb, whatever he says. Go.
It's okay. Very quick. So hold on. Very
thanks. Socialism was bad. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Very quickly. When I present evidence and arguments, you say, but the Nazis did things I didn't like and they killed socialists. As if all other fucking socialist countries that I mentioned, Cuba,
no, they're incomparable
China,
fucking
Cambodia,
examples.
And
they're
the
totally
Soviet Union
incomparable.
Also killed socialists.
Yeah, this is a total cope argument from Mr. Clean over here. Like, I mean, it's really entertaining that he's going to sit here and go, socialists can't be socialists because they kill socialists. When communists have like factions where they kill other factions all the time. Like, look at the war between Stalin when he took over. Like, first off between Lenin and Stalin, and the what was it? The white.
So why didn't they persecute conservatives?
I listened to all your dumbassery for a whole.
So why didn't they persecute conservatives? Why did they align themselves with conservatives?
You literally just bitched about getting interrupted, and then I'm over.
Why did they align themselves with conservatives?
Go ahead and finish, Gibbs, but answer his question as well.
I'm not going to answer this question. I'm going to answer the question.
Because you can't, because you're a fucking moron.
Why don't you just pipe down there, pipe size? Like, let me just talk, all right? Here's the thing. So first off, you said, what is socialism defined by somebody from that era? Why don't we ask some people from that era? National Socialism is the...
Do you have any on hand?
Create a new... No, listen, unlike you, I know how to read. I know that's a hard concept for you. So we can go back back to that.
I'm not sure
Anyway,
you do.
National socialism is. Listen, you can try to like interrupt me every time I talk because I'm about to drop knowledge on you, or you can shut the fuck up and maybe learn something. I know that's a revolutionary concept for you. Anyway, back to people that actually lived during this time. National socialism is a determination to create a new man. There will no longer exist any individual arbitrary will nor realms in which the individual belongs to himself. The time that happiness is a private matter is over. There's another one. Socialism as the final concept of duty, the ethical duty of work, not just for oneself, but also for the fellow man's sake, and above all, principle. Common good before own good. A struggle against parasitism, especially easy and unarmed income. It goes on and on like this. I can even go to their economists. This rhetoric is extremely populist. It's pro-worker. The thing that Scott was talking about earlier is the Nazi joy through strength through joy program, in which they give out a set number of weeks per year that the person has guaranteed for vacation. They have built leisure opportunities, which is part of the thing they do as a nationalization thing. They build leisure things like Alpine hotels, and then they set it up so their workers can go there. They have other implementations, like he mentioned before, where they have like wage guarantees, all sorts of things. These are all social programs and socialist programs in general. Black Toy mentioned earlier that yes, they privatize some of these industries, but really that's just another form of nationalization of the industry whenever it's all under the helm of the Nazi Party. Now, I know that you want to sit here and do historical revisionism because you don't like the fact that your baby Lenin and Marx were racist sons of bitches, and all these things that only existed because they wanted to have slave labor by being racist. That's the only way socialism ever can work, is to have a subjugated slave class. Then sure, I understand you're upset, and I understand why you wouldn't want to act like Mr. Clean and try to clean up history to your benefit. Now go ahead, Ajax. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of questions, but maybe the most important one is the one I keep asking that you refuse to answer, which is why did the Nazis align themselves with conservatives if it's just about them trying to eliminate political rivals?
Who were those conservatives?
There were a bunch of conservative parties in Nazi Germany at the time that they came to power. You want me to name every fucking party?
I do.
I mean, I don't have them on hand. I could look them up if you don't believe
making
me.
some bullshit up, and you don't even have the idea for the thing you're going to say. You're
Okay, well, so there was the, let's see. I actually have it right in front of me, but okay.
I feel Rich was wanting to come on here. His question is, which party is the conservative party?
Rich will be on later.
Yeah, so
but Lactoid has a question. So while non-smokers looking that up, go ahead and.
Well, I got to throw a couple points, right? So when we're talking about the German Labor Front, which was the sort of big union that the Nazi Party put together that everyone had to join, it's important to look at like what the primary focus was. And the primary focus, like everything else in Nazi Germany, was to basically disregard individual liberties and disregard really working standards for the maximization of productivity. And sometimes the maximization of productivity actually required a bone being thrown to the workers now and again, which did happen, right? So you have kind of something contradictory happening at the same time, right? You do have more vacations and beautification efforts and pools being installed in workplaces, while at the same time you have increased working hours and declining wages, frozen wages. This actually fits the motivation of the Nazi Party to just keep everybody at work and keep them working to fund the war effort. That was the primary goal of the Nazi Party. And when you're talking about conservatives supporting the war effort, non-smoker, I think it's, there of course were, but it's important to also look at what is the kind of conservative that was supporting the Nazis really. I mean, the conservatives that made up the key support for the Nazis were, former monarchists, former members of the Fatherland Party, extreme militarists, a lot of anti-Semites, obviously, and the owners of these massive industries and conglomerates that had a direct financial interest because they were tied to the Nazi Party. There were free marketers who were kicked out of the Nazi Party because they opposed state intervention in the economy, right? So Hjalmar Schacht, for example, was the minister of the economy in Nazi Germany up until 1937, when he was removed in favor of Göring because he specifically opposed state intervention in the economy. Him and a number of other thinkers that were pro-free market, comparatively to what Nazi Germany was at the time, were excised very similar to the Marxists being excised because they didn't fit Hitler's specific goals of conquering Europe. So, and I feel like you're sort of falling into a little bit what you criticized at the beginning, which I actually sort of agree with the criticism of like, well, everything's a Nazi. It's not. Sure, you can distinguish between modern day socialists and Nazis, absolutely fair. but you would have to agree that they're primarily the group that's like throwing out the term Nazi against conservatives. It's going to be left wingers, at least in the American context, right? I mean, it's going to be your people who are going to be saying, hey, these fucking Nazis in the Republican Party, the conservatives, the Nazis have a lot to do with conservatives. The conservatives were supporting the Nazis. You're really emphasizing that part while kind of leaving out the part of like, oh, hey, like they were kicking out the free marketers that were involved in the Nazi Party at the same time as they were kicking out the Marxists.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead, Lance,
think,
real quick.
let me just respond quick. First of all, so it's the German National People's Party, the Bavarian People's Party, and the German People's Party, in case anybody would like to do the research on it. It's like totally a not contentious point. Anybody who can Wikipedia like the 1933 German federal elections would know that what I said was true, but this fucker in the top left needs to like push back on everything. So anyway, there's your answer. What Lactoid's saying, I think, just so people don't get me confused, I'm not saying that the Nazis were like libertarian or that they were even capitalist. I think that they were supported by the industrialists, and I think they were even supported by some liberals to stop the socialists. And it actually goes back to what Scott said before, the Marxist understanding of Nazi Germany is that Nazi Germany kind of came about as a result of the development of socialism in Germany, and socialism being the next stage in the development of the mode of production, right? And so the Nazis sort of formed as this extreme, schizophrenic liberal reaction to socialism in an attempt to sort of disintegrate it and then do this radical shift backwards, right? I think that, that's one of the reasons why Nazism is often associated with the term, reactionary. It's a reactionary political trend. It's meant to move backward from the progress of the Weimar era and socialism as a trend more broadly in Europe and throughout the world. And I don't think the Nazis were unique in this. I think what you saw in the United States, for example, I wouldn't call that fascism or anything like that under FDR, but what you had was FDR's government attempt to stop socialism from gaining any kind of political foothold by giving all sorts of kickbacks to the people and using the power of big government and executive orders and stuff like that to try and basically limit the appeal of socialism, limit the appeal of changing and developing the mode of production into a socialist form. So yeah, I mean, that's my thing.
I need to respond to this real quick. I have to because respond specifically to a point that I made.
Yeah, it's fine. Go
So I really do. I think that you sort of missed the point here. It's the Nazi Party was not a reaction to the socialists, right? It was a reaction to, or at
That's
least
not what he means by reactionary. He means
well,
the way
I'm not.
Marxists mean it.
I understand, right? But in the totality of what he was saying it was a liberal knee-jerk reaction to socialism, right? That was before he used the word reactionary. And I think it's important because it's kind of slipping in like, oh, this is the reaction to socialism. But really it's more complicated than that, because there's this sort of contradictory point of view that was held by Nazis, which was their main goal is simply combating what they saw as, international Jewry, which was really like organizations and systems that were opposed to their hegemony in that area. And that included the Soviet Union for sure, which was made up of Marxists, but it also included the stock markets. It included what they saw as Jewish-controlled businesses. It saw what the liberal, leisure West, right? The decadent West. It opposed anything that and all this together. So it wasn't just socialists, right? It was also stock markets. Like for example, like they went and closed stock markets in mass. I think the total amount of stock markets in Germany dropped from like 23 to 9 under their rule due to specific Nazi action because they saw stock markets as being Jewish. So it's not just a reaction to socialism, it's a reaction to really anything that threatens the party.
So very quick question, Lactoid. The things that you seem to be naming as like not as these things that make them separate from socialist revolutions or socialist, countries. Can you name any that don't also fit those same patterns, right? So when, for example, when you were talking about the concept that, oh, they're against socialists, or that they eventually, created a slave labor like system where the state was controlling production and the state was controlling what you could produce and the state was controlling prices, right? They weren't actually helping the workers. They were only throwing them a bone. Can you name any communist or socialist revolution where the the government also didn't do that? Did that not also happen in the USSR or in China or in Cambodia or Cuba?
Well, people are imprisoned and forced to do labor pretty much everywhere in the world. So no, obviously not. And I also can't name a place where there wasn't like violent crackdown and central control in any communist country, because that's sort of, I mean, you're the ANCAP here, dude. You know that the state's monopoly on violence is what gives it, power. It's what gives it, its real basis of control, right? So anywhere where there's central government, of course, there's some degree of violence, right? Used against people to keep them in line and, maintain control and order and stuff like that. I guess the distinction I was trying to make in bringing up the slave labor systems in Nazi Germany is to say that they intentionally enslaved working people on the basis of race. So the notion that they did things for workers sort of ignores the fact that they took millions and millions of working people from different groups in the country that were considered undesirable, and on that basis threw them in camps and forced them to do slave labor. Now, I also think there's something to be said about the distinction between concentration camps in Nazi Germany and the gulags in the Soviet Union. There's a lot of serious differences there, the main one being like the body count, right? But even just the total number of people per capita in the population who were imprisoned there.
You're going off on a tangent to something that wasn't even asked to you. I was asked in Lactoid, but that's fine if you want to answer it, because I mean it's fair. It's an open panel. But
so I thought you were asking me.
I also thought you were asking non-smoker, so I'm sorry.
No, I specifically said you twice, but it's okay. My point is, my problem here is that you're bringing up things that I'm not bringing up, as if they are an argument as to why they're not socialist. But you're not actually backing that up. You're just saying because the concentration camps were presumably, in your opinion, worse or had a larger effect than the gulags, which I don't think most historians would disagree with. That somehow makes them not socialist, or that makes them different in some way, but you're not actually grounding that in anything. You're just saying Nazis are bad. We all agree Nazis are bad, but what we're saying is that Nazis are a socialist movement, and then you're saying, but Nazis bad though, as if that's supposed to be an argument against whether or not they're socialist.
No, you're misunderstanding me. The point I'm trying to make was that you were essentially, unless I'm misunderstanding your argument, which I might be, essentially, the point you were making was that one of the claims that the Nazis might be socialist is that, or I think you were actually contradicting Vigilante. You were saying that the Nazis did X, Y, and Z for workers, right? They did things policy-wise that benefited workers, thus proving the fact that they're socialist. Am I misunderstanding the point you made totally?
To be clear, I said they did stuff for Aryan workers. Aryan workers only.
Right. And actually, I was sort of reaffirming Vigilante's points based on what he just said. But maybe I misunderstood you in terms of me responding wrong. I'm pretty sure you were asking about examples of prisons in communist countries and all of that stuff. I feel like I addressed that pretty directly. And I also, but yeah, go on.
The concept here is that a key marker behind socialism, if you're not going to use a modern definition, right, like a clean modern definition of socialism, which would just be like the state taking over industry for the worker, right? If that is the case, then it's an open and shut case as far as I'm concerned that the Nazis were socialists. But if we're using it in a more kind of
definition, that's a conservative definition.
Okay, well, if you would like to propose a separate definition of socialism, right? I've given multiple in my opening statement, right? If you like one that you think is better, that is able to keep in all of the other socialist revolutions and countries, but somehow gets rid of Nazis, please be my guest. I concede my time right now. Please go ahead and give that definition.
Okay, so the best definition of socialism that most people use, it's the workers taking control of the of industry. It's not the government taking control of industry, it's the workers taking control of industry.
So would the Soviet Union fall under that? No, right?
Yes.
So you would say that the Soviet Union was actually the workers, and that there wasn't a government control of industry, and that there wasn't a hierarchy of like Leninists, and then a much worse situation. You wouldn't call that state capitalism. You would actually say that the workers were in control, not Stalin or other dictators.
The problem is that state capitalism is technically a variant of socialism. It's not.
Well, that doesn't sound like the workers taking over industry. I'll give you a moment to think of a clean definition that works, right? Like write it down and get like a nice clean definition that we can use that would take away Nazi Germany, but would include the Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, and Cuba, right? Which I think we all agree are socialist revolutions with
Cambodia was not.
I don't actually think under the definition you gave, Scott, that like Nazi Germany would necessarily fall under that, because I don't think the goal was for. Well, I'm about to say it, right? I don't think that the goal was for the benefit of the worker. I think the goal was really for the benefit of the party, right? So we have contradicting ways where they'll throw the workers' bones
and the Aryan
motivated. Well, they'll throw the workers' bones to keep them motivated to keep building the tanks. But they will like force them to work overtime, reduce their wages, figure out ways to keep them in
game right now.
Hold on.
You're playing the left's game of no true Scotsman with socialism right now, right? Because you
Fair
could make
Queen
that
also wants to
argument
interject
of literally every socialist revolution, that once the revolutionaries got in power, that they didn't actually care about the workers, and that they enriched themselves, and that they controlled things through a hierarchical structure. Like you can't, say that this applies to
Can I ask Scott a question quick? Because I know.
Let me respond to this real quick, because I'm not playing the game here, because I don't think, I think even explicitly, really, at least following the Night of the Long Knives and the removal of the free market element as well, I don't think that they were even explicitly in favor of the worker. They consistently, on their propaganda, on their message, were prioritizing their beliefs on the continued existence of the party, of the German people, of German dominance. Absolutely, they were.
No.
I guess we just disagree.
He's right, actually. They were. The whole basis of their movement was on the German Volk, right? And oftentimes they use language like appealing to the worker to appeal to the average German. But Scott, I have one question for you, and then I know Fairy Queen wanted to go. I saw her raising her hand, but not that I'm taking over the panel or anything, by the way. But anyway,
answer his question with the quote real
sure.
quick,
Okay, but do very quick, just if you could like write down a note of what I'm going to ask you. Do you think FDR's America was socialist?
I think FDR's. I think Republicans are socialist. But that's why I gave you the opportunity to give your definition.
But I'm asking you.
Yeah, obviously, I think FDR was socialist.
Okay, just checking, because
he
I
thinks
feel like
I'm a
your
socialist,
definition.
not
Your definition
Right.
is
I
just
gave
so
you-
broad
I'm
that
giving you the
everything is socialist.
I'm a socialist.
No. I'm doing internal
Right.
critique, and I'm doing an internal critique from.
So by Scott's
from the
logic,
Marxist-
of course,
No, you're
Nazi
lying through
Germany
your
is
fucking
socialist
teeth.
because everything
You're
is
trying-
socialist.
No, you're lying through your fucking teeth because you're trying to get a dub.
I'm just saying what
instead of
you said
actually
back to you.
arguing on the merits. No, I said.
I'm just
from the
saying
very
what you said
beginning,
back to you.
I said from the very beginning, from my opening statement, that I would consider all of you socialists. It was part of my
Exactly.
opening statement. And so then I said it depends on what we mean by socialism, and I gave a definition from the original French before the Marxists came forward as anti-monarchy, as of the people where liberal democracies would fit. And then I said what I would use, if anyone else wants to talk in, is the vulgar or the classical Marxist idea of it as the historical dialectical materialism.
What do you make of the Nazis
movement.
aligning themselves with the monarchists?
Yeah, let me ask you this: what percentage of the monarchists
hold on, no.
held
Let
in
me
that?
get-
That's
Fairy
what
Queen's
I'm
been-
gonna want to know. What
Fairy
I'm
Queen's
just
been
going to say
trying to
this
get
quote
in.
very quick.
Like, 'cause you
I'll
keep
just
bringing
super
that up.
quick,
What
super
percentage
quick,
did they win
super
in
quick
that
quote to Lactoid, because
By the way,
Lactoid,
just out of curiosity.
I told
'Cause that's
Lactoid
the
no.
group he
So
keeps
let me just
naming.
let me
Okay, so
let
go
me
ahead
just
and
give him
finish
his
up,
evidence
Scott,
super quick.
and then Fairy Queen, then Gibbs, you can do your thing.
So from Ernst Rudolf Huber, the Nazi Party spokesman in 1939, right? So well after 34, right? Private property, as conceived under the liberalistic economic order, represented the right of the individual to manage and to speculate with inherited or acquired property as he pleased, without regard for the general interest. German socialism had to overcome this private, that is unrestrained and irresponsible view of property. All property is common property. The owner is bound by the people and the right to the responsible management of his goods. His legal position is only justified when he satisfies this responsibility to the community. Now, the rhetoric and everything is still there that it is for the people, for the worker.
No, I said,
but
wait,
no,
wait, let me respond to this.
Then that
Let me respond
that's
to this.
every
No.
fucking socialist revolution.
No,
Sorry,
it-
Queens,
so
never
it,
gonna
so
get
it, so it's. I'm sorry, but like it's not right. So look, I'm also not a fan of socialism. Of course, you think I am a socialist, so I guess I'm not a fan of myself. But I think that when you look at the socialist regimes, there definitely is like this aura of at least pretending to care about the worker. And you can say that ultimately the actual power interests are with its own, within its own. Hold on, within its own party, right? And the problem is, if you want to play this game, right, what you can get to, well, of course, that's not true socialism. But with Nazi Germany, it's
the game you're playing. Yes.
With Nazi Germany, I think it's different because the focus, the propaganda, and the policies all orient themselves away from like a worker-oriented perspective.
That's not true. That's not true.
And they hold on, and they orient themselves towards a pro-party position at the expense of everybody else. Whether that be the worker having to work longer hours, no longer having collective bargaining, and having lower wages, having their wages literally frozen. Like their employers couldn't give them raises if they wanted to, right? I mean, you have this element of like very much anti-worker element of the Nazi Party. You also have an incredibly anti-business party. One thing that non-smoker has not responded to, or Vigilante, is if Nazis were truly a response to socialism, why did they close down so many stock markets? Why did they put capital requirements for businesses and close down businesses that didn't meet them? Like, that doesn't make any sense. If they're truly this like liberal decadent, like why were they so antagonistic towards private interests? Well, the reason is because they were afraid and concerned and were in competition with anything that threatened their goals. Like, it was truly a third way here.
You have not answered my question still, which is, what is the substantive difference that you're claiming here between this and the Soviet Union?
So the Soviet Union, okay, so the Soviet Union, the fundamental difference is the Soviet Union was oriented towards a pro-worker perspective throughout its
It's not a
entire
difference.
existence.
I just gave you evidence that it
Well,
wasn't.
no, it is a difference, right? The policies that the Soviet Union implemented were at the detriment of liberty and the detriment of freedom, and were absolutely in favor of state control. But the justification was, we are a vanguard party that's important to establish world socialism, so we're going to maximize the well-being of our citizens.
But they do that. They literally have policies that do that. Actually, like, let me give you examples right here. Say they literally no, not a big difference. So first of all, I mentioned strength through joy earlier, right? One of its the Nazis' most popular policies was to give trips, picnics, very cheap free holidays, along with evening classes, theater trips. All of this was for the workers. All right, so they were giving them like gifts and time off that they'd never had before. They eliminated a lot of these trade unions and whatnot, but they set wages that were like capped at a certain amount. These are all socialist policies that are for the worker, by the worker. Y'all mentioned Nazi rhetoric was very like populist with like Volks, like the people's car. Yeah, the reason why they call it the people's car is it's made by the people, for the people. That's like the whole like logic behind it. I mean, you can just keep going down these things, like these lists. So everything you're saying is unequivocally not true.
No, I have said
We've
this.
conceded this multiple. We've conceded
Hold
this
on.
multiple times. Like, you
So-
get access, like they get access to these things, but it's only white people that get it.
Okay,
That's
Fairy
still
Queen.
socialism.
Fairy Queen.
That's still
Fairy
socialism.
Queen.
Can we hear from Fairy Queen?
Fairy Queen.
Okay, so there are a couple of things. So at the very beginning of the panel, you asked a question, Kai, which is, what would a person from 1930, how would they have understood National Socialism? And would they have understood National Socialism to be the same thing as socialism? I have a person who was alive during the 30s, and he published this essay in 1941. It's The Lion and the Unicorn by George Orwell. So who, for those of you who don't know, like, he was a socialist like throughout his life. And what he said, there's a quote like in the page, you can find it. I'm looking at page 26 out of 47. It's specific, and what Orwell claimed at the time was that while there were many features of socialism that National Socialism borrowed, and that the German state implemented, like when they took control of Germany, that there was a fundamental difference, according to Orwell, between between National Socialism and between socialism. And the key fundamental difference was the idea that like the socialism, according to Orwell, takes equality of human rights for granted, and Nazism assumes just the opposite. The driving force behind the Nazi movement is the belief in human inequality, the superior of Germans to the other races, the right of Germany to rule the world. Outside of the German Reich, it does not recognize any obligations. And so and the reason why that quote matters and why this essay matters isn't just because Orwell said it and that therefore that means it's true. The reason why it matters is because like this was written in 1941. This was before before the information about the Holocaust, before most people knew about concentration camps, before the true horror and shock about like what Nazi Germany was truly available to the majority of people at that time. And so the fact that we have somebody who is a socialist who doesn't recognize National Socialism as being a true variant of socialism, I think is I don't think is unimportant. But secondly, we can have
Sorry, I
back
didn't
and
mean to
forth
interrupt you.
on
My
that.
bad.
Oh, okay.
I thought I was muted.
Also,
My bad.
Could I just ask for a point of clarification real quick? Are you saying, because I know Vigilante and them were saying this, and I think you were taking issue with this. Are you saying that that because they have race like issues, right? They have race like beliefs and racism and whatnot, that they can't be socialists because
no,
socialism.
no, no, no,
Okay,
no, but no.
because
I
that
am
seems
not
like
saying
what his disagreement was with it.
that is not what I'm saying. I don't think that's true. What I'm saying is I think that this word socialism is similar to the word postmodernism, where it's a dog whistle amongst conservative communities to often essentially mean leftism or to mean liberalism. Like, so when you say that somebody is a socialist, like I understand like we're having a different conversation here on this panel, but if you walk out and if you go into like just a group of average conservatives and you say, hey, that guy's a socialist, you're not really talking like you're not really having a conversation about Karl Marx and like the repossession of of capital by the state. You pretty much like it's a way of pointing out the person with blue hair and a nose ring that's walking by with a pair. That's what that means, typically speaking. So I disagree with the idea that like socialism is merely the property of the left and merely the property of liberals. And this is something I wanted to get into with you, Vigilante. In your opening statement, where is it? You said that the Nazis were no different from modern American capitalism. You just said that it was socialism for the rich, socialism for the Aryans. I think this is an opinion that I have that I'll put forward to the panel. My understanding, the reason why ethnicity and why racism was so heavily pronounced throughout Nazi Germany was that the definition of what it meant to be a citizen within Germany during that time meant that you were of the Aryan race. You are a true German. You are truly of the German people. And so the emphasis upon, like only for the Aryans, only for those, well, that's because that's how the Nazi Germany at the time defined like what it meant to be a citizen within that country. And that's the reason, like, why, at least that's an opinion that I propose to you on why that is. Secondly, you also said reformist of Marxism, that this was an abandonment of the core elements of Marxism. I am not sure that National Socialism is that. And to explain to you, and I'm not even sure that Karl Marx or Engels would have agreed with that. And the reason why is because, like, in the Principles of Communism, in the Communist Manifesto, both Marx and Engels described people who were the bourgeois socialists. They criticized, people who would call themselves socialists, but who only sought to remove evils inherent within the evils that they perceive to exist within a capitalist society, while maintaining the existing society, often on such methods such as the welfare system and claims of social reform, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why you couldn't understand National Socialism or Nazism to fall under socialism, as understood as an example of bourgeois socialism underneath this category.
Yes, which is social democracy, which is kind of what I implied that it was. Bourgeois socialism is literally social democracy.
I'm not sure about that, but fair enough. So, but basically, okay, so we're saying the same thing. We're just using different words, okay? But then you would agree with me then that just because you assign something as being a socialist policy or as being like a socialist country, that doesn't necessarily mean you're saying it's a conservative or a liberal country. You're just describing the economic system that exists within it. That doesn't necessarily mean I don't know, like, so like this central tenet of communitarianism, of viewing the state as a living organic body, as having separate organs that contribute to the general welfare and to a larger interest or to the general will of the people, that isn't necessarily merely a liberal frame of mind. I think there are many conservatives who like, and to be sure, like they'll invoke different policies. They care about like different specific issues, but I'm sure I know I could find you examples of people who are staunch conservatives who do view the state and who do view the government as a collective for where we all have to work together in order to achieve an outcome. That's not a libertarian perspective, but I do think there are conservatives who would say that and who hold that position.
Do we have a definition for socialism yet?
I mean,
Still working on
whenever
it?
we brought that up, I was going to literally just read you the Oxford Dictionary definition.
All right.
I actually take issue with the whole definition thing.
Well, I wonder why. It's amazing that Lip Dick Dana White would have an objection to having some kind of definition. Because, like you mentioned this earlier, that we talked about having arguments of substance. He has not presented any argument of substance. In fact, even when he brought up the like monarchists and whatnot,
Can you spell definition, dude?
I asked what the percentage was of that party that got the vote. Well, I'll tell you what the percentage was. In 1932, that group party that he mentioned got less than 6% of the vote. So it sounds like, yeah.
Which one? I mentioned three.
Very heavy conservative party.
I mentioned
like
three.
Lewis. Yeah.
I mentioned three parties.
The German People's Party is the one you mentioned.
So what about the other two parties? You fat fucking idiot.
The point is that you're just sitting here. You're picking
Dude,
very
you
minor
are a
parties
sloppy
that formed a
retard.
coalition. Listen, I know that you think that that's a dunk, but it's not. You've been presented nothing.
No,
of
you're
it.
just really
You're over
stupid,
there-
dude. I mentioned three parties.
Listen, Howie Long,
Three
calm
fucking
down.
parties.
It's all right. I'm giving you.
So what about the
actual
other two?
numbers. Well, what percentage of those numbers are? You mentioned them. You didn't happen to mention the
Dude,
numbers.
there's
Why don't you
literally
mention the
okay.
numbers?
There's literally a
You want me
chart
to
you
pull
can
up the
look
numbers?
up.
I
It shows
have
the
it, sorry.
entire
I
election
have it,
history from like
Either you want him to
1920
address,
to
either
19.
Gibbs, either you want him to address you or you want to keep
Well, I want
talking.
him to.
Like, pick one.
I will keep talking. I want him, and this is my question. I want him to give the numbers, percentage elected for those parties that he mentioned. That's what I want, because he keeps talking about this chart. I have it in front of me. What numbers? Or you want to mention up?
Brother,
Just say that.
there's literally charts you can look up of every federal election in Germany from 19. Do you want me to answer or you want to blubber?
Just tell us the numbers.
I don't have exact percentages in front of me. I'm trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you. There's literal charts you can look up of the results of every German federal election from 1919 to 1938, which show you the exact distribution of every party and its representation in government. And if you look at them, it very clearly shows a trend that the conservative parties, the various conservative parties, there was not just one, all ended up being consolidated by the Nazis eventually. All of their support was consolidated by the fucking Nazis. It's like not a controversial point. You're pushing back on this and it's not even really necessary at all.
Well, it is necessary because you want to lump like a percentage of people that's less than 3% of the total vote that are sitting in the elected parties, and it's less than 10% of the total vote overall. So you're sitting here picking like a fringe factor and going in. That's my point.
Dude,
Yeah,
You're not helping us at all.
I am helping this.
No, you're not. You sound really fucking dumb, dude. You're making them look stupider. You're making them look stupider. You should
let him
drop off the
finish.
panel.
Just let Gibbs finish this point, stupid or not. Just let him talk.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
This
he
is
should
my
get off
point.
the panel.
You know, listen, you should get off life, but I'm not going to tell anybody to do that in GTA. That's a terrible thing to do. But
Hey,
either
come on,
way-
grow up, tard.
Either way, listen, this is the point I'm making, is we're sitting here, he's trying to lump in a fringe conservative group, which we've already mentioned earlier. I mentioned Rich earlier, because this is the question Rich wanted to answer. What was the conservative party in Nazi Germany? Well, he already mentioned three, all right? And even with the three he did, that he refuses to get numbers for and say, oh, they formed a coalition government. Yes, they formed a coalition government and gave them a slight edge that got them elected, because the alternative was even further left people than the Nazis, which was outrageous to them at the time, right? So yeah, of course you had a fringe element jump in with them, but to sit here and lump in a like group of people that's less than 6% and say, oh, the Nazis aren't socialist leftists because 6% of a coalition government sided with them is the most ludicrous, idiotic thing I've ever heard.
Dude, so do you want the
Then it just
numbers
don't
for
matter.
like a random election?
No, I don't. Please don't. Please stop feeding this.
Can you just
The numbers don't
listen,
matter.
Fabian, I'll
The
stop.
question
Can you
is-
just tell him why he's an idiot?
Yes, the numbers don't matter. The question
That
is,
was absolutely-
why do the conservatives align with the German party? It doesn't matter
yeah,
if
sure.
they got 20%
I'll
of the
answer
vote
that.
or if they got 2% of the vote. And the answer is very simple. Is because they were nationalists, because they were part of an Ein Volk philosophy of blood and soil, because they had racial supremacist views. And those
But
things
those
were
aren't
more
inherently
commonly
right-wing.
held. No, but they happen to be more, the nationalism tends to be inherently right-wing, to be fair.
You can have leftist nationalism though, like
Yes,
China has
yes.
it.
National syndicalism is a combination of these things, but that doesn't necessarily. But it doesn't pertain, as you already stated and you already figured out. It doesn't necessarily pertain as to whether they are or aren't socialists. It's a
That was
red
my
herring.
point.
It's a design to get you to freak out about percentages and about right wing stuff instead of just simply saying it doesn't matter that they were there because they had some of these values. It has nothing to do with whether or not the Nazis were socialist.
I mean, I would push back on that, but if you want to just go through the elections
define
of
socialism.
the
You
German, well, dude, you think it's everything, so you can't define socialism. But German federal election history,
gave
just
you
look
multiple
through
definitions.
it. Here's 1928.
You won't
right?
give one.
So you
We'll see.
have the German National People's Party winning 20% of the fucking vote and 100 seats in parliament. So at
That's nothing to
1928.
do with 33 though, which is the important one when the Nazis were actually
33 is when the Nazis came around. They consolidated the fucking conservative vote, you idiot. How do you not understand this?
It's not what happened.
So what happened? What happened to the conservatives? Why'd they stop winning support?
Well, partly because of all the Weimar Republic failures.
That's why the conservatives lost support?
Yeah, you're gonna have whenever you're having rampant, like just everybody's having problems. You see a rise in socialist like tendencies and leanings. And
So would you say the Weimar Republic was more conservative or more socialist?
it's more conservative than the Nazi Party, whatever it's.
What did you say? It's more conservative or socialist relative to German politics at the time, which you seem to be a fucking expert on?
The Weimar Republic. I mean, is it more socialist? It's less socialist than the Nazi Party.
Okay. So relative to the time period, would you say the Weimar Republic was more socialist or more conservative?
It would be more conservative than.
How about relative to the rest of Europe? Do you have any idea what the fuck you're talking about?
I absolutely do. Do you have any?
Do you know why the Nazis were so popular and why they opposed the fucking Weimar Republic? And
All right, Hold on.
This is like 10th grade history, dude. 10th grade fucking
Fat
history.
bald guy, fat hairy guy, chill out. Chill out. Gibbs, chill. Gibbs.
I get
Gibbs.
and then you
Gibbs.
ask another question.
You're literally spurging.
Behind it, and that's what's happening every single time.
Did anyone else here graduate high school? Can they explain to him that the fucking Weimar Germany was extremely progressive and like a social, essentially
Hey,
like a socialist
non-smoker,
system?
sweetheart. Do we need to put you and Gibbs in a corner and make
Dude,
you all
nobody gives a
man?
fuck what you have to say. You're not moderating the panel. Fuck off.
Fuck you, faggot.
Okay, well there you go.
Not
TOSing everybody
necessary.
who's streaming on Twitch, you retard.
Not my problem. I'm not streaming.
Okay, well, good thing he's on the panel, Kai. What a fucking asshole. Dude, listen, you obviously never graduated fucking high school. I don't know what to tell you. This is like real basic stuff. This is, look, Fabian, Lactoid, anytime you guys want to talk about this 1v1, you're more than welcome to. Fairy Queen, I don't know you like that, but same, right? Vigilante, I love you, but like this guy is a fucking disaster, dude. He has no clue what's going on. He can't have a serious conversation.
Listen, Mr. Clean, I definitely have more of a clue than what you have, based off everything you've said so far. This guy, you repeat the same insult and say, "Oh, I have no clue." Every
I'm
time I
gonna
give
reset.
specific facts that go with this, and you have no actual facts.
Dude, you were wrong about the election thing. You're wrong about Weimar Germany. You don't know how to spell socialism.
If I can interrupt, this has been fun, but it's also kind of toxic. So I'm just gonna ask a question, okay? So
Yes,
the question
please.
is, the question I want to ask: what are the stakes of this conversation? Like, I understand, like, and I think it's good. I like that we're talking about like whether or not it's true or not. I think that has value. I think it's important, right? I think it's also important to ask, like, why exactly we are invested in this conversation. Is it just to say, oh, well, you say I'm a Nazi, well, screw you. Actually, you people are the ones. Is that the goal? Is it the aim of this conversation? Or is there some deeper motivation behind
I'll give it from an
just-
ANCAP perspective. I'll give it from an ANCAP perspective so then everyone else can give it from a more normie perspective, with the exception of maybe non-smoker because he's a Marxist-Leninist, so we'll both be the fringe here. But from an ANCAP perspective, it's very important that I highlight the dangers of collectivism and what socialism is. And to me, it's actually even more important that I show that the right wing is socialist too. And that socialism is the danger, that the collectivization of property, presumably for the little guy, is the danger. That the Fox Motor Company, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, is a disastrous and destructive and horrific evil. And that it doesn't matter whether or not it comes from people that are blue-haired feminists or it comes from groypers. Socialism is a disease and a danger. And when the right is so recalcitrant to name the Nazis as the socialists as they are, it becomes a problem for me. And it becomes even more of a problem when the left tries to deny this. Because this idea that fascism and socialism are these wildly different things, when you may be able to find some differences in the way that they play or some cultural differences, some small things, but at the end of the day, they have the same effects. They are the same governmental structure. It's the same slavery. And it's all of this presumably for the greater good that the worst evils are done. And that's why it's very important that we identify Nazism as socialism, because
thank you for the
socialism
gift
is evil.
I think it's a worthwhile question. I mean, for me, I guess my whole point in being here is to gain, viewers and exposure on Twitch. That's the point. No, really, but for real, like, I actually think that this is
socialist streamer.
It's a brain dead take. Honestly, it's a brain dead take for people who watch PragerU. And I get Fabian's point. I actually do from an ANCAP perspective. It's just, my point is you have to be so far out on the fringe to come to that conclusion logically. You have to just say, well, then everything is socialism, right? And I think the average person hearing that is probably not swayed to think like even in your response, and not to get into a whole thing about this, but it's like you mentioned there's a distinction between left and right, and you think that they're both socialist. So I guess my view would be like, okay, on the Fabian scale, this would have been not left socialist, this would have been right socialist, in distinction to the left socialism of like the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I'm very specific, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that like when you have communist-based revolutions that are left-wing in cultural values, and you have fascist revolutions, they're both socialist. They're both economically, they're as socialist as you can get. They're you can't even tell the difference between them, and they have the same stated goals. The difference is that more left-wing communist variants are more dysgenic and they destroy the family. And so it takes longer for a country to heal from communism, because communism is even worse than like the kind of, what you might describe as reactionary fascist things.
Thank you, Samantha.
And you can look at basically any formerly fascist versus any formerly communist country, and you can see the results, that fascism is a lot easier to heal from because it's quite literally just less destructive than the communist variants, but they're all different variants of socialism.
I mean, I would argue that fascism was probably like the primary genesis point of the Second World War, which devastated Europe and killed millions and millions of people, more than any other modern war, and it took, billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer money and, various other things to even rebuild from fascism. It did more damage in a shorter period of time than maybe any other political movement in history. I'm kind of like astounded by that.
You're engaging.
Real quick, level 3 hype train.
Specific...
Thank you all for your generosity. It's truly appreciated. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Scott.
You're using the war as an example because Germany was the main pivotal point here in the war, which I don't think is really actually engaging with what I'm saying in terms of the dysgenic values that the culture and the society and the country itself has. Obviously, World War II was worse than fucking Cuba's revolution because it was isolated to Cuba. The other thing here too that I think is really problematic here is it's not like the Soviets didn't help invade fucking Poland, my guy. It's not like they didn't turn over 100 to 300,000 Jews to the Germans.
But
like the Soviet Union was as much responsible for that until the Germans decided to fucking invade them.
The Soviets reached out to the British and the French prior to the war to try and make mutual security guarantees and stop Hitler from the start. And both the French and the British sent diplomats over to the Soviet Union who were low ranking, and basically the Soviets knew they wouldn't come to an agreement. So they kind of put Stalin in a position where he had to sign Molotov-Ribbentrop to have any chance of defending himself against an inevitable German invasion.
Massacre in Poland, right? He didn't have to turn over Jews.
I'm not saying everything Stalin. No, you're misunderstanding. I'm not saying everything Stalin did is excusable. I'm not. But what I'm saying is, insofar as Stalin's contribution to the fact that World War II happened, I think Stalin was trying to do a lot to prevent World War II from happening. And, the best case for that would be the country that suffered the most in World War II was the Soviet Union. I mean, the absolute annihilation of millions and millions of Russians, the destruction of infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not to excuse anything the Soviet Union did war crime wise or anything like that. But I think we could all agree, Nazi Germany is primarily responsible for World War II.
Right. My argument is very simple. When I'm talking about the difference between fascism and communism and those different variants of socialism, as there are many variants of socialism and how they occur. My issue is that I stated this is what happens within the country. You bring up World War II as a means of this is how destructive fascism really is. And what I'm saying is that they're not the only fucking players in the game of World War II. It's very possible that World War II might never have occurred if Stalin had put his fucking foot down and refused to engage in that treaty. We don't know. We can't play the historical game of whether or not that would have occurred. You could ask historians about political realism and why World War I and the Alsace-Lorraine and contribute. There are a lot of different reasons why World War II occurred that isn't just magically fascism causes world wars. That's not actually engaging with what I said. Instead, it's more subversion from the guy that won't give a definition of socialism.
Okay, Electoid wants to get in. I believe he will give and has given a definition, but go ahead, Electoid.
I wanted to go back to I guess non-smoker. I'll start with you. Did you ever answer when I asked if fascism, specifically in Germany, the rise of the Nazi Party, if this was in response to if this was a liberal response to socialism, why did they target the stock markets, close most of them, and by law limit dividends to 6% or less? Because that primarily hurt the business owners, entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Changebox. So that was directed to non-smoker?
Oh, fuck. I'm sorry. I was talking to my chat, dude.
You're good.
Can you ask me again?
No problem. If your statement, which I hear a lot from leftists, which is that Nazism, fascism in the German sense here, Nazism was a liberal response to socialism. Why did they target the stock markets, close most of them, and then by law limit the amount of dividends that could be distributed to 6% or less?
I don't think that the criteria for the Nazis being anti-socialist is even necessarily how they handle the economy. I think that the criteria that I judge them on is how they treated the existing socialist movement. And that was throwing them into labor camps and fucking, turning many of the socialists, executing them, turning them into slave labor class, liquidating their movement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, banning their political parties, need I say more? So I'm not denying that there weren't aspects to Nazi Germany where, they tried to stop finance capital. And you're right, in a lot of Nazi Germany's critiques of capitalism were that it was a Jewish institution and that it was supported international Jewry and had to be severed for this, that, and the other reason. And I'm not even denying that Hitler, as posted in the article that Kai put in the chat, he privately admired Stalin's Soviet economy. I just don't think that all of those things add up to, Nazi Germany definitely was socialist. And I know Fabian hates this, and look, I get it. It seems weaselly, but I guess I just think of things historically. My point is, when you try to, socialism is such a big term, right? That you have to try to identify in like context, right? What did it mean at a given place and time? So were the Nazis socialist by some very large definition of socialism? Yeah, I guess you could make that argument. My argument is that they were not socialist relative to German politics in the 1930s.
Can you give a definition for socialism?
Yeah, well, so the problem. Well, hold on, a couple of things. So I wasn't necessarily specifically going off because I'm obviously there's some disagreement even between me and Scott here, but what I asked you was when you said that fascism was a liberal response to socialism, the answer that you just gave was it's not necessarily about even the economic points. It has to do with how they treated the Socialist Party in Germany. So if we just take that answer, could this not just be a case of leftist infighting?
It's not a case of leftist infighting because of the reason that I keep making about the elections, right? The Nazis were sort of rolled themselves into the German conservative movement, right? And so they took the support of the left-wing movements in terms of winning over, you know, the people, and also absorbed the right-wing political factions and formed themselves in contradistinction to the left-wing movements. And then went about, you know, banning them and arresting them and imprisoning them and all that stuff. You know, I don't like that argument about left-wing infighting because what it implies is that, well, all of these political parties were left-wing. Well, then why would they exist in opposition to each other, right? There would be no need for that. If they all were left-wing, they all had the exact same goals for Germany, they would have been one united party, right?
Well,
they formed
wait. Let's imagine instead of the Nazi Party, it was like, let's say they named themselves Socialist Party number 2, and they were also socialist, but they were slightly less socialist. And then they got into power and they demonized and prosecuted all like the more socialist people. Because they did that, are they now right wingers? Because on the Overton window of Germany, they are to the right of this Socialist Party.
I think if you said that they absorbed the right-wing movement and then did everything in their power to stop the other left-wing movements, that by definition, by the criteria I've stated, yeah, they would be a right-wing movement.
Wouldn't any less socialist movement absorb the right-wing elements of the country if they wanted to win political power and still?
Yeah, that's why all liberals are Nazis.
Okay, so I'm dealing with one person who says everyone's a socialist. I'm dealing with you who's saying that all liberals are not. Like,
I give definitions.
Yeah. See, this is what I'm talking about. There's nothing of substance. That's been my issue this whole time with Heisenberg's definitions and like debate style here. Like he's been over here sitting here going
That
like
was funny.
with like. No, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
It was
Like,
a
there's been
joke.
no substance. It's literally been like just straight like questions, no answer. Then when he has talked about history, it's glossed over things like, oh, the gulags aren't as bad as the Holocaust. Well, when the gulags killed like 30 to 50 million people, you know, oh, because they're not
What?
leftist.
Where are you getting that number
You know,
from?
like some crazy numbers. You know, they killed lots of people.
We're
Or the
30 to
or,
50 million people.
or Mao.
Can I get a source on that?
Yeah, we'll go look it up in a second.
30 to
Whatever.
50 million people?
Regardless, they killed a fuck ton of people in the gulags.
Oh, no, it might be 30 million or it might be a couple thousand. I don't
We'll
know.
look it up in a
What
second.
difference does it make? Give me the numbers now.
I'm sure somebody.
If you don't have the numbers, you're wrong. Shut up.
The point is that like we're sitting here talking. We were just bitching about how numbers didn't matter earlier, and now we're sitting here crying about I might have misspoke on the specific millions. There's a lot of people that died. In the
Dude, you're grossly overstating the
wasn't even
number
the
to a
millions, it
ridiculous
was in the-
extent.
When we talk about the USSR, it was in the 100,000s.
Yeah, you're nowhere near the number, dude.
All right. Secondly,
he's bringing up estimates of deaths in the Soviet Union as a whole.
Yeah, that's
from
Right. But
famine,
he's saying that's because
the
of
Holodomor,
gulags, and
but
he's trying to attack me. He's trying to do a gotcha on me.
The point that I'm making is you know, sitting here and trying to like pigeonhole authoritarianism and like the right wing racism, the racism is right wing issues, right? And that's just not unequivocally not true.
Yeah,
We
leftists
can look
are
at.
racist.
I know. That's what I'm saying. But that seems to be the thing that they keep bringing up here. They're saying because of this, then they're actually right wings. So like it's everything they're saying has no actual substance, and there's no actual like validity. And when they bring up like other countries and they say, oh, they just hand wave those and say those don't count under their bullshit definition that they have, or their amorphous definition that they don't want to give because they don't like definitions.
Can I ask? I guess for Gibbs and Scott, what's your definition of left wing that you're using here?
So I would consider left wing to be the antithesis of right wing, and I would define right wing much the same way. Hold on, no. Hear me out. I know it's a negation. I would say it's a negation of right wing, and right wing I would consider to be much the way the distributist puts it in his 9-factor definition. So, familial, about the entropy of systems, a desire for order, an importance of family structure, etc. So like it would be a much longer conversation, which is why I really want to avoid definitions that use left wing or right wing when talking about socialism, because I think those are even harder to define for most people than socialism itself. But just another quote I wanted to throw out because I thought it'd be fun while we're talking while we're talking about definitions, etc. So from Marx's German Ideology, 1845, communism is for us not a state of affairs which is to be established, an ideal to which reality have to adjust itself. We call communism the real movement which abolishes the present state of things. The conditions of this movement result from the premises now in existence. This is the kind of shit you get when you try and get Marxists to define socialism or communism or anything. These like vague, open-ended kind of like, a process of history of capitalism defeating itself into the next stages. And I just don't understand how Marxists can believe shit like this and then magically pretend that Nazism isn't socialism when it absolutely fits all of those processes, because there were other socialists that they killed, as if that didn't happen in every other socialist revolution. It's insane.
Do you know of like a socialist country where they persecuted other socialists to the extent that Nazi Germany did?
Why are we saying to the extent that Nazi Germany?
Didn't Stalin like
It's
remove
pretty
people from
significant.
photographs?
Yeah, to the extent that Nazi Germany did, meaning like banning all of these parties and throwing masses of the population in jail.
Anybody who was a Trotskyist?
So
I don't think to scale it compares, right? And the reason that's significant is because the point I'm trying to make is that was an effort by the Nazis to completely eliminate any sort of progressive movement in German politics and consolidate control around this, authoritarian, right-wing, backward-moving sort of political trajectory.
This doesn't deal with whether or not Nazis were socialists, right? This is like
because like
the USSR persecuted plenty.
Killed all of the anarchists. Lenin also killed all of the anarchists, because they were his main competitions. Like that's not the
Hitler was an anarchist.
Okay, go ahead, Franklin.
Yeah,
Did you say he was an anarchist?
Yes.
Now you're just being silly.
German sociology.
Because you can't.
Hey, can you guys let Fairy Queen talk?
Can you let Fairy Queen talk? Let Fairy Queen talk. Thank you.
So, Smoker, don't hold. I can't generate an immediate historical example for you, so I don't know. Like the answer, my intuition tells me that that's not true. Like as Laxoid mentioned Trotsky, Vigilante mentioned Lenin, but I think it's reasonable, right? Like it's not unheard of. Like when there is a revolutionary movement that happens within a country, and then that movement, whatever side of the political spectrum it happens to be, takes power. Immediately there is an execution, and people are often purged out, so that like the new regime. I mean, the French Revolution is an example of this, right? Like directly after Robespierre took power, he immediately people were thrown in jail, they were executed, they were tortured and killed as a way to try to maintain power over France. And so
Paris International, yeah.
I don't think it's and so I agree with you, and it is certainly true that like the Nazis did execute socialists. They burned books. They threw socialists. All of those things are true, but I don't think that necessarily is a point that proves that therefore National Socialism was not socialism. Instead, I think that simply speaks to the reality of what happens when there is an insurgent political movement that takes control of a country and then wants to maintain power and control over that piece of land. I don't think that's does that seem an unreasonable thing to say? Like I wouldn't say that yeah.
I wouldn't say that's unreasonable. No, I guess, okay, let me make a clearer distinction here. So like Trotsky, right? A lot of people like to talk about Trotsky. Trotsky was part of, and the Trotskyists were part of the original Bolshevik takeover of Russia, right? The left wing in Germany was not part of the Nazi takeover of German parliament, right? That's the difference. Okay, so what you saw in the Soviet Union was a very aggressive and, let's call it like a, evil in some sense, consolidation of power in the party around one individual, i.e. Stalin, right? Which eliminated all opposition, to his hard line of thinking, right? Hard line basis of Soviet communism. But the difference with Nazi Germany is that the Nazis formed in distinction to the socialist movement, which existed in Germany, and then did everything in its power once they came to power to eliminate it completely as a political force. That's the difference.
It's a complete non-argument because, like, it's not like the Mensheviks weren't fucking pushed out. They were a left-wing fucking political branch of Marxist-Leninists that were there fighting, and they had to be removed. And many of whom
the
were
Mensheviks were Marxist-Leninists.
Fairy Queen has a follow-up.
They were socialists.
The anarchists that I just mentioned.
They were part of the Leninist coalition. Or they were not. Was that
I'm
not?
pretty sure there was a
okay.
distinction between the Leninists and the Mensheviks, dude. I'm pretty sure they were not
there's a
one and the
distinction.
same entity.
Absolutely,
That's
I
kind of
agree.
why they
There are
existed as a
different
separate thing.
leftist, right? There's different leftist individuals and groups, and when one gains more power, they push out, possibly kill, possibly assassinate, or possibly exile those groups. This is a non-argument about whether or not Germany was a socialist movement. Your argument thus far boils down to because they persecuted leftists and socialists. And then we say, well, look at how the Soviet Union did the same thing. And now you're like, oh, but that's not quite the same thing because the numbers are different, or because, it was a unique perspective of Germany because they were allied against this as like part of their propaganda. It's just moving goalposts from someone that won't fucking give a definition of socialism because you can't. And because you know that it would require that you have to bring the Soviet Union and Germany together, or you have to say that neither of them are that.
So Fairy Queen, then Scott.
What? Lactoid, I mean, I think.
I'm sorry, Lactoid.
Non-smoker. So I hear you, and I would agree with you that I think that it's true that like the National Socialist movement, like it relied and it depended upon the Conservative Party in order to maintain power. I don't think it would be appropriate to describe it as a left-wing movement. That's not what I don't think that that's true.
Why?
But what I
Why
would
not?
Because
why wouldn't it be?
I mean, they were eugenicists. They did the first trans surgery, right? Like they certainly had progressive elements to them.
Pro-abortion. They're pro-abortion.
Go ahead and let her respond.
So my understanding, so for a couple of reasons, like one of them is like, so if we're thinking about liberalism, if we're thinking about what leftism is, the purpose of it, as I understand it, is to, I mean, it's literally like within this, within like the line of the unicorn, as I just read, like the purpose of it is to defeat the idea of inequality, right? The purpose of socialism, like from a left-wing perspective, is to take the equality of human rights for granted, which Nazism does not do. It celebrates, the inequality that exists and doesn't deny it, and even tries to exacerbate it in this instance. But you can yell at me about that later, Scott. I'm trying to talk to non-smoker, but non-smoker, the issue that I'm having with that, even though I would agree with you, I don't think that it was a left-wing movement. I don't know why that would mean that it wasn't a socialist movement. Like I've mentioned this like a couple of times, that I think it's possible to be somebody who is a conservative, to have a conservative mindset and even conservative policies that you might want to implement, but you might still want to be a socialist. You might still believe in the idea that people should be able to jointly use, share, and receive the benefits from collectively like owned resources. I know we're using like conservative and liberal because we're in the 21st century and like this is why it comes up constantly. 1, 2, 1, 2. But I don't know that socialist necessarily means leftist, right? Just like I don't think that postmodernist just means like liberal or leftist, right? I think you could probably find some conservative postmodernists, just like I think you could probably find some conservatively minded socialists. So,
1 second. So unfortunately, non-smoker has to leave. So if he has any last statement or last shout out, go ahead and.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I could respond to that quick and would love to have a discussion with any of you guys about any of this stuff. except that one person. But yeah, just real quick. I mean, I would say that my answer to that is that generally speaking, socialism is always left wing. It's always progressive, right? And left wing is essentially, when it comes down to definitions in the way we develop these terms, it's the progressive faction. It's the faction that wants the most amount of radical change, right? And those are the socialists. Socialism, as understood by Marx, it's a development in the mode of production. It's the forward movement of history, right? It's the next phase in human development. So it's always left wing. The right wingers are trying to move in the opposite direction, right? They're either trying to create this stagnation of maintaining the current order of things as they are, or move backward, right? In the case of monarchists and groups like that. So that's my short answer. Good talking to everyone, right? Nice time. Please, anybody, if you'd like to follow me, twitch.tv/nonsmoker. And the rest of you guys have a great night, all right?
Peace out. Thanks again for coming through.
Yep. Thank you, Smoker.
Can we go to
Man,
closing? Because I don't think there's a strong.
saying?
A strong. Can we just go to closing? Because I don't think there's a strong opponent against kind of a block here now of the Nazis were socialists.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now that Ajax is gone, like I think we're gonna be okay. I don't think without Huey Long, we struggle.
Like at this point, it's just gonna become a TED talk.
I gotta correct
Yeah.
a point. I know I gotta correct
Go ahead,
something that
Lactoid.
was wrong that was said. Otherwise, I'm gonna have a fucking aneurysm. So it's just like a brain thing I have. I'm sorry. Non-smoker had said, and he can't rebut this because he left, but that's his fault. That the left-wing element of the Nazi Party was not responsible for the Nazi takeover of Parliament, and the timeline there is just absolutely wrong. So it was in January of 1933 that Hitler took power. The Enabling Act, which essentially turned the Parliament into a rubber stamp for Hitler, was in 1933. And then the Night of the Long Knives was in 1934. The 1934 Night of the Long Knives is when the left-wing elements, such as the Strasserists or Strasser was killed, but then also the other elements, including Gottfried Feder, were removed from power, the more anti-capitalist left wing. So the rise of power of Hitler was undoubtedly strongly supported by the left-wing factions of the Nazi Party. So I think that actually makes it a lot more comparable to the Trotskyists at that point, right? Because they were involved in the Bolshevik takeover of Tsarist Russia in the same way that the anti-capitalists were involved in Hitler's takeover of the parliament in Germany. Just when you look at the timeline, it's very clear. So,
Thank you, Lactoid. Vigilante, anything?
No.
Cool. So I guess with that, we will head to open, or unless Gibbs, you have.
Well, if we're closing. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything specific. I think that we all summed up most of it. I will be here. I'm gonna mute myself for a moment, but I'll be here and open again in a minute.
Oh, you're opening up to like your chat or whatever. Is that what's happening?
Well, I was going to say, just might as well head to open panel. If anybody has any points they want to bring into the conversation, it'll allow them to do so. But all the same, it seems we've reached the main end of where we were getting to.
Yeah, I tend not to do just a lot of open panel stuff because when I'm
I get
streaming,
that.
at least, because I can never tell like who might just come on and start screaming the N-word or something.
Yeah,
No,
I get that.
so if it's okay if I do a closing and hop out of here?
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, I'm Fabian Liberty, anarcho-capitalist, libertarian. Come check me out if you want to talk about libertarian philosophy. From the nerdiest of nerdy, like Hoppian argumentation ethics, down to economics and stuff like that, or whatever it is. So I think we had a fun little debate here. I think I remain unconvinced in any way, shape, or form that the Nazis weren't socialists. I think historically it's very obvious that they're socialists. I think most economists agree. You asked earlier, were there any people at the time that would say that it was socialist? Of course there are people that are going to say that it is and it isn't. One of my favorite books on this topic that I think everyone should read is Gunter Riemann's Vampire Economy. He's a Marxist economist that wrote in 1939 about why the Germans and the National Socialists were completely exactly the same as the Soviet Union, that all of the problems that exist in the Soviet Union exist in in Germany, that the economic situation is exactly the same, and that privatization is a lie. That ultimately, the idea of privatization was used as a means of escaping liberalization of the economy. They put it in their friends' hands. They massively regulated it. They controlled price. They controlled what they could invest in. They controlled dividends. They controlled the stock market. They controlled what you could produce. They controlled how much you could produce. And the fact that some industrialists, gave money to them, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of their money came from workers, the facts that tax revenue grew from 32 and 33 and 37 to 38, 1,365% from corporate tax, but actual corporate revenue only grew 110%. The fact that they had the largest union ever, the fact that the Reichstag fire decree got rid of private property rights completely, the fact that that was their entire spiel was for the worker, the fact that Nazi Germany reorganized industry into 13 groups with separate subgroups so that they could control every single solitary portion of the economy really shows that they basically nationalized the economy for the worker. They had progressive elements that they adopted from previous administrations and in their culture. And so what we see is a somewhat left-wing, somewhat right-wing, completely socialist party that took over. And instead of being honest about this, Marxists have to lie over and over and over again to try and make it seem like the far right and the right wing are this capitalist, private property loving right-wing people when they just aren't. So again, Fabian Liberty, find me wherever you want. And I'll wait in case there's any other closing statements before I dip out.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm very glad you came on today. Glad having you here for the first time.
Appreciate it. It was fun.
Yeah, Fairy Queen.
Hi guys, thank you so much for listening. You can find me at Fairy Queen's Cottage on YouTube and at Fairy_Queen on Twitter. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Fairy Queen. Lactoid.
Yeah, so although I will posit that Nazi Germany was, I think, incredibly anti-libertarian, as I think everybody agreed on the panel. They're absolutely anti, hopefully, any anti-free market even. I would go as far as say that maybe I'll get a little bit more pushback there from the left-wingers. But I think that's pretty clear. I think when it comes to defining whether or not it's socialist, it's tough. I do think it's tough, and I do think that defining it in of itself is probably just a better way, right? I think categories exist for a reason. They exist in order to help us define differences that are notable, obviously. And I think that Nazi Germany and fascism generally is different enough to warrant its own category. You can say perhaps it's more related to socialism than free market capitalism. It definitely pulls elements from it, but I'm skeptical to say it is socialism, right? I think that the key difference that I'm really looking at is I define left wing pretty simply. Left wing generally is just a dissatisfaction with structured hierarchy, and right wing is a satisfaction with some kind of structured hierarchy, whatever that may be. And so I think that when you look at the shift from Tsarist Russia to the Soviet Union, you do see, I think, what is markedly a left-wing movement, right? A shift away from an incredibly hierarchical power structure of the Tsar ruling over everything. I don't think the Tsar was socialist, even though he dictated economic policy for everybody. I think that there was, that's monarchy, I think, which probably is Nazi party's closer to than anything else. But I think with Nazi Germany, when you are moving from the Weimar Republic being relatively left, and the Nazi party being just this weird amalgamation of everything bad at once, and coming into power for the sole purpose of perpetuating itself, for consuming power into the party, destroying the free market elements, destroying perhaps even the Marxist elements of the party, simply to push the wheels of history, as it would define, and conquer various lands. Its economic system was intentionally built to reimburse itself off the conquering of new lands. In fact, there was meetings between Hitler and top officials, which they literally planned for that in their budgetary models, where they could only actually sustain their budgets if they conquered new land. So everything was geared towards that. So I do think it's a little bit more complicated. I think third way defining it as a third way movement makes the most sense. Yeah, you can find me at Like Toy TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Epic as always. Thank you. Vigilante, any closing statements?
I mean, like, I still would say, like, depending on which version of the political spectrum we're going off of, Nazism isn't really left wing or right wing. I would say, like, if anything, it's probably center right. If we're going off the quadrant political spectrum, because economically speaking, it is pretty much centrist, but at the same time, it's like authoritarianly speaking, it's obviously at the very fucking top. So I mean, I would say it'd probably be like, if my screen was like, it'd be like right here, like top center right. Like, it's not really left wing or right wing.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And we welcome Tiberius to the room as we head to open. And I thank you all. If anybody needs a dip, great having you, and have a great evening.
Hold on. Give me just a second. Give me just a second. All right. Okay. Okay, that was a shit show, but it wasn't as bad as a shit show as I thought it could have been. That was, oh my God. If it opposes the Socialist Party, it can't be socialist. Gosh, man, I feel like I over prepared for that. Like, I just kept throwing facts and quotes at these people, and like they just kept being like, but the socialism, bruh. Oh God, that was so rough. Oh man, I know. I don't know what to do. Hold on one second. I'm looking for something. Okay, that's not enough. I was looking to see if the internet had like a Disney movie tier list. Like Disney films, but there's so many. I kind of want to do one. I don't know. Let me see if I can find a good one. Disney kids movies tier list. Right? Because there's so many. I'm going to find a good one later. I'm not going to worry about it now. I'll find a good one and we'll have a fun little thing. I want to do one where I can add in all like the Disney princess films and stuff. And like later, maybe next Wednesday or something. Because what I want to do is I want to do a tier list with you guys, that especially those of you that might be parents or might become parents. And what I want to do is I want to do one where we put it from based to not based. Like, I don't care about necessarily how good the story is, how good the music is. Those will be elements of it, but mostly, what are we adding Pixar to the list? Yeah, we'll add Pixar to the list too. And like movies that are like completely unknown, we can just like throw those away, or ones I haven't seen. But I've seen like basically all of them because they have toddlers. And I want to talk about like which ones are based in terms of like show your kids this film. Like, this is a film to show your kids because the politics, the ideas are based, right? And then like, the philosophy is good behind this film versus like, this is trash. Like, to give you an example, I feel like Princess and the Frog is like S tier based. Right. So like that I don't know that it's the most based, but it's one of the most based, right? Because the storyline behind Princess and the Frog is you need to focus on family, stop focusing so much on your career, settle down and find a man that's worthy of you, that compliments you, that you can marry and have grandbabies with. Because if you focus too much on one part of your career, you'll get burnt out and you won't be able to start a family And those are the things are just as important as your dream to own a restaurant, right? Like that's like one of the most base. And then like on the bottom of base, like some of the worst, I would say Elemental. Elemental's a new film, and like that film is basically miscegenation must be done because aren't we all better when we race mix? Which I don't really care, but it's so weird. And then the other part is fuck where your family came from, fuck what your family built, fuck what your family is trying to build for you. You should only do what you want to do, which is go to art school. Like fuck everything they sacrificed because they sacrificed it so that you could live the American dream, which is to go fuck off with your black boyfriend and be in art school. It's the wildest fucking, actually I think it might be Indian and white. It might be the tropes that they're going for, but it's the most non-based fucking thing ever. If art school rejects you, take it out on everyone else. Fucking Elemental 2, fucking the rise of Germany. Would you be willing to do a TikTok raid one time? Oh, you mean with Andrew? Like raiding TikTok? Like with on the Crucible? I have an account. I have stuff set up to do that. We just haven't gotten around to it. I've been busy and he does them at weird hours. Because I like watch my son twice a week and I'm doing other stuff. I do kind of want to do one. Speaking of which, I'm like 90% sure Saturday we'll be back here, guys, to do a libertarianism debate. I should be on the Crucible doing a libertarianism debate. I haven't heard back from him, but I was invited, and those are usually at 9:00. Let me see. Crucible would like you to participate in a debate this coming Saturday on libertarianism. 8 p.m. Eastern if you're available. I responded, but Andrew doesn't. He always has do not disturb, so he doesn't check his DMs, but like once a week. Right. And like, and it was with a guy that wanted to debate me and said that he would. So probably. Yeah. I mean, he's doing his, getting famous shit, which is cool. It's fine. But I'll probably be on Saturday at 8, to do a debate on libertarianism. So if you want to learn about libertarianism and you want to watch someone probably grill me thinking that I'm some prag and that like, I'm some like, we must let the lefties win because the non-aggression principle says we can't do things. And then just like disabuse him of his bullshit notions. No, wait, what? There's a guy named Dude who says he is undefeated and claims socialism has nothing to do with Nazism. I'd like to see you rattle the guy. He sits on TikTok and waits for people to show up. Have a super great... Oh, yeah, have a great night. You too, Quinn. Yeah, I don't know. So we'll see. It should be fun if it does happen. But nevertheless, I think I'm going to get out of here. Because I got stuff I got to do tomorrow. I got to my rental property company or whatever, talk with them and then pick up my son and stuff. I might be on Discord or on Twitter or whatever. So expect me tentatively, but expect to see a debate on libertarianism Saturday night. And then if you're in the Discord, make sure you join the Discord. If you're not, if you're in the Discord, we'll probably do a movie night this Sunday. So if enough people show up, I'm not sure what. So there is a channel in the Discord called Movie Requests. If there's a movie that you think is like really good and based, that's like really, really good. It takes a second for the chatbot to respond. It takes forever. Hold on, wait a minute. I haven't seen the chatbot all night. The chatbot might be off. Let me just grab a link real quick instead of worrying about the chatbot. Sometimes the chatbot just cuts itself off for some reason. There you go. There's a link if you want it. Join the Discord. We will probably do a movie night Sunday night. Put something in the movie request if you like it, whatever. We'll be hanging out. The Crucible will stay without God. You have no basis for good. Yeah, I know. That's fine. I do. They don't. Existence exists. I do it all. It's fine. Jim Bob will probably, that's what Jim Bob would say. Jim Bob would be a worthy opponent on that, but like most of the Crucible guys aren't even strong enough to deal with basic objectivist epistemology. Right? It starts with existence exists, and then grounding law of identity. And then by doing so, grounding logic, and then by doing so, grounding non-aggression principle, and then, you know, then there is a discussion about moral good in terms of selfishness. Damn, Sunday night is City of Heroes night, the only stream I'm actually on. Hey, man, it's fine. Ain't a big deal. Can't always, you know, I have to pick a time. Let me get out of here, boys. Jim Bob will probably, I've already spoken. I did a video with Jim Bob. He tried to get me to be deterministic. I'm like, no, I'm not. Can you remind me of the day and time? Sorry. So Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern will be most likely to be the debate. And then movie night is usually around like 9 o'clock. We do it like 9 to 11 Eastern. I do everything Eastern. But I appreciate you guys being here. I will see you around. I'm going to try and relax. And yeah, like I said, see me in the Discord, see me on Twitter, see you around. You should post upcoming events in Discord. Well, I can't do it until I know for certain. So I need Andrew to confirm 100%, and then I'll push out the live stream as soon as he does. I'm aware that the more I tell you about it, the more likely you are to, you know, fit it into your schedule. Oh, the movie night? Yeah, I'm probably put it out tonight or tomorrow night. But also I'm putting it out right now. So deuces.